Good morning. I would like to call the Niagara Police Service Board public meeting to order for October 31st, 2024. My name is Jen Lawson and I am the chair of the Niagara Police Service Board. We begin the meeting this morning by acknowledging that the Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawindaronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in the Niagara region today. The regional municipality of Niagara Police Service Board stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We'll do roll call. Member Kiokio.
Present.
Member Gibson.
Present.
Member Yip.
Present.
Vice Chair Capizavanu.
Present.
Member McKendrick.
Here.
Member Steele.
Here.
Do any members have any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest? Seeing none. If I can have Member Kiokio and Member Gibson move that the minutes of the public board meeting held Thursday, September 26, 2024 be adopted as circulated. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? No one's opposed, so that's carried. The Canadian Association of Police Governance hosts monthly webinars as part of their educational strategy to keep police boards and police executives across Canada apprised of issues currently affecting policing community. 2 webinars were held in October, one entitled Hate Crimes and Radicalization in Your Community, and one entitled The Voices of Change, Pioneering Leadership, Redefining Culture, and Evaluating Recruitment Standards in Policing. Recorded copies of the webinars are sent to the police board members for their viewing. On October 2nd, Vice Chair of Capizavanu and I joined Chief 40 and District Commander Inspector Dave Gomez at the Town of Pelham Council meeting. Chief 40 and Inspector Gomez addressed council members and provided a presentation on the policing programs that are offered throughout the Niagara region. They also took the opportunity to address any questions or concerns that are specific to the Town of Pelham to ensure that the needs of the community are met through favorable solutions. On October 5th, Vice Chair Capizavanu joined members of the service at the 10th annual Nurturing Our Roots traditional powwow. The powwow was held at the Meridian Centre in St. Catharines, and participants came together to honor the rich traditions and culture of the Indigenous community. On October 9th, members of the service's Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Unit hosted a learning event that featured guest speaker Vivek Gupta, and Vivek discussed the meaning and significance of Hinduism Diwali celebrations. He provided insight into his spiritual teachings and the reasoning behind those teachings. On October 10th, a budget workshop, training and education session was held with the board and the Niagara Regional Police Service about the 2025 proposed operating budget. The purpose of the session was to educate members of the board on the 2025 police operating budget. The education session was held in accordance with Section 44(6) of the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019 and was closed to the public. No decisions, directions, or minutes were taken or recorded at the workshop. The board will consider the 2025 proposed operating budget as part of today's agenda. The International Association of Chiefs of Police hosted their annual conference and exposition from October 19th to 22nd at the Boston Convention Center and Exhibition Center in Boston, Massachusetts. The theme of the conference was entitled Equipped to Innovate, and the program offered thousands of law enforcement delegates from around the world a variety of information sessions and workshops that related to the policing profession. Vice Chair Capizavanu, members Kiokio, McKendrick, Executive Director Reed, and I attended the conference, along with Chief 40, Deputy Chief Wasilevich, and members of the service's senior leadership team. On October 24th, I joined Chief 40 and members of the Senior Officers Association at the swearing-in ceremony to welcome 12 new recruit members and 6 currently serving officers to the Niagara Regional Police Service and 2 new recruit members to the Niagara Parks Police Service. The ceremony was held at police headquarters and provided the board with service representatives an opportunity to become acquainted with Niagara's newest police officers and to meet the members of their families that were in attendance to share their successes. On November 7th and 8th, Barrie Police Service, Durham Regional Police Service, and the Canadian Society of Evidence-Based Policing will be co-presenting the Building Bridges Evidence-Based Policing Conference at Blue Mountain Resort and Village Conference Centre. The conference is being supported by the Canadian Association of Police Governance, the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. The agenda will explore topics such as introduction to evidence-based policing, change management, recruitment and retention, resilience and wellness, professionalization of policing, innovation and future of policing, police legitimacy, and more. Executive Director Reed, Superintendent Lagoteria, and I will be attending the conference. On November 7th, the Niagara Regional Police Service is hosting a promotional ceremony at police headquarters in the community room. The ceremony will recognize and celebrate 12 members that have recently promoted to the ranks of sergeant, staff sergeant, manager, and director. Vice Chair Capizavanu and Member Kiokio will be attending the event on behalf of the board. On November 19th, the Niagara Regional Police Service, along with the Police Service Board and the Niagara Region Police Association and Senior Officers Association, will host the Police Annual Awards Ceremony. This event recognizes outstanding service members and fellow citizens who have demonstrated excellence or made invaluable contributions to the Niagara community, along with the service retirees and long-standing employees for their commitment to the service. The ceremony is being held at Club Italia in Niagara Falls. Doors open at 4 p.m. and the ceremony will begin at 5:15. All board members and staff will be attending the event. On November 26th and 27th, the Ontario Association of Police Services Board will host their 2024 Annual Labour Conference at the Hilton Toronto Airport in Mississauga, and attendees will have the opportunity to learn more about the police labour relations landscape across Ontario. Topics include WSIB, legal trends and case studies, the impact the culture has on recruiting and retention, the operations of the Inspectorate of Policing, and the prevalence of mental health disorder symptoms among police service personnel. There will also be a workshop on coordinated bargaining, and Board Solicitor Woody McKeag will be part of the panel discussions. Vice Chair Capizavanu, members Kiokio and Gibson, Board Solicitor McKeag, Executive Director Reed, and I will be attending the conference. There are no committee meetings scheduled in the month of November, and the board's next scheduled regular monthly board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 28th, and will begin at 9:30 a.m. in the community room at police headquarters. And that is all from me. Chief, do you have any reports?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And with respect, I wonder if we could start by standing to take a moment of silence to honor two members of our service that we lost in the last couple of weeks, Constable Stephen Phillips and recently retired Inspector John Sawicki. At the time of their deaths, Steve was assigned to our Port Colborne detachment, and as you know, John recently retired. Both members were very much respected, and then they'll be missed. So I just wonder if we could stand and just take a brief moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. I'll begin my comments, Chair, focusing on community safety, and I'll begin by advising that we're now dealing with 12 homicides this year and 19 fatalities. Our members continue to their tireless efforts in serving our community and seeking justice for those that family members have lost. I also want to mention some excellent work done by the homicide unit over the last couple of months. There was a media release highlighting the work that was undertaken in partnership with the FBI, U.S. Homeland Security, U.S. Drug Enforcement, Drug Enforcement, DEA, Los Angeles Police Department, the RCMP, the OPP, Toronto Police Service, Peel Police Service. The homicide was in relation to a murder that occurred in Niagara Falls, and the homicide was tied to a drug cartel from Mexico that was international in scope, and homicides have been committed across the country in furtherance of the illicit trafficking of narcotics. It was a multi-jurisdictional, expansive investigation that led to the arrest of those responsible, one of whom is still outstanding. And law enforcement agencies across the globe are looking for this individual who's a part of a drug cartel. We were also involved in another multi-jurisdictional investigation into bank robberies. It was named Project Opal. Between December 8th, 2022 and March 16th, 2024, 8 bank robberies occurred across Ontario. In partnership with the OPP, Barrie Police Service, Belleville Police Service, Durham Regional Police Service, our service, investigators came together, and in August, the OPP and our partners coordinated the arrest of the suspects as they were in the throes of about to commit another robbery. It was an excellent example of kind of the integration of police services, intelligence-led, coming together, kind of seamless operation that prevented further violence. And you know, when these bank robberies take place, you know, it's life-changing for the people in the banks. So great work by our team. During the arrest, I can advise that handguns were used, and in at least 6 of the robberies, the persons inside the bank that were robbed were bound. It was just like, you know, you would see on television with an organized crime group involved in violent criminal activity. And during the commission of those offenses, they, I don't want to say stole, they robbed the banks of over $2 million. So a significant organized crime, organized group involved in violent crime. As a result of the investigation, 3 suspects were arrested during the robbery, and a 4th suspect was arrested on the heels of that in Vaughan. A 5th suspect was charged, and he remains outstanding. So our law enforcement agencies across the province are again looking for him. On October 7th and 8th, the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Board of Directors meeting was held here in Niagara Falls, and I know that Sergeant Reasetti spoke to the board on matters relating to fraud, false pretenses, and the preying on elderly citizens in our community. He presented to the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police in the pursuit of creating a provincial strategy on how to combat these crimes. I had the opportunity to be a part of those meetings, and I can tell you that the efforts undertaken by Ray are now going to be part of a national strategy involving provincial police agencies across the country, and the RCMP are also using it as a framework for their investigations and sharing of information. As you referenced, Chair, senior members of the service and members of the board attended the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference, where important issues like recruitment, retention, peer support teams, cyber crimes, the dealing of persons in a mental health crisis, those types of issues were all central to the presentations. And we were proud to host an upcoming OACP EDI course here at headquarters, and that will be next week in this room, led by members of our service, where police officers from across the province will be coming. In terms of community engagement, at the end of September and beginning of October, we participated in several events related to the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. On the 4th, we participated in a unity walk in Fort Erie, where I had an opportunity to walk with Mayor Redekop as part of that undertaking. It was organized by the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center. There were also events organized by the Niagara Native Friendship Center that our members participated in. We participated in flag raisings as well, and the powwow in St. Catharines. On October 2nd, Staff Sergeant Sarah Rose and I attended Mayor Gannon's Youth Advisory Committee in Lincoln to listen to her youth advisory team, to have an opportunity to interact with them, to talk about, you know, what policing looks like, to hear from them what policing looks like to them, and to hear from them what they thought we could do a better job of. It was a really interesting discussion. As you referenced, on October 1st, we attended Pelham Town Council and had an opportunity to present and speak to Mayor Youngkin and his team about issues that are of concern to them, traffic enforcement, wanting to see more visible police presence, things like that. On October 4th, I met with the Mayor of Thorold and his CAO, and we had an opportunity to talk about things that are of concern to him. And he has invited us to attend his council in the spring, which we will be doing as part of our continued ongoing community engagement. On October 7th, we hosted the Chief of Police Inclusion Council meeting, where we had a presentation from the Canadian Hearing Services, and that presentation outlined the programs and services that they offer to that community. On October 17th, our recruit class participated in a diversity tour that visited local faith groups, similar to the tour that the board took in the summer. The tour included the Salem Chapel in St. Catharines, Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Center, Islamic Society of Niagara, Niagara Regional Native Center, and the Niagara Sikh Gurdwara on Lundy's Lane. This was a learning and education day in our ongoing commitment to understanding different communities and promoting a culture of inclusivity. On October 23rd, members of our EDI unit attended the Welland Heritage Council and Multicultural Center to present to newcomers on the value of recognizing and reporting hate crimes, as well as their rights and responsibilities as a Canadian citizen, but also as tenants in Ontario. On October 23rd, members of our child abuse unit, Deputy Chief Greco, and myself attended the Penner Home Hardware Brave Hearts Gala, benefiting the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center, supporting the courageous children and the guardians in the region. October 24th, as you referenced, we witnessed our new recruit class graduation ceremony as we officially welcomed 18 new officers to our service. In terms of member wellness, on Sunday, September 29th, we attended the Canadian Police College, or Canadian Police and Police Officers Memorial Service on Parliament Hill in Ottawa to honor and remember our fallen officers. Almost 100 of our members, joined by yourself, Chair, paid our respects. So that was a significant undertaking. That was the largest turnout we've ever had from our service, so it was significant. And on October 1st and 2nd, there was an Invisible Wounds Conference held here in Niagara Falls, dealing with first responders and PTSD. In that event, Deputy Chief Waslovich attended, provided comments, in addition to having members of our member support unit also be in attendance. On Wednesday, October 9th, we welcomed Vivek Gupta, as you referenced, Chair. Vivek is also a member of our Inclusion Council, and he's a tremendous speaker. He's one of the most interesting people I've ever had an opportunity to speak with, and we're lucky to have him as a friend and colleague of the service. And I'll end my comments there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Thank you. Chief, if I can have you introduce the first presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The first presentation is our K-9 unit. So we're fortunate to have Sergeant Jeff Vanderspeck here. Jeff is an experienced police dog handler, and he's here to talk about their unit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members, for having me. Looking forward to giving a quick introduction on our K-9 unit. All right, you'll see our presentation is up on the screen there. Oops. So our K-9 unit was established in Niagara Regional Police in 1988. And right now it's comprised of 1 sergeant and 6 constables. It's been that size since late 90s to early 2000s and continues to be that size as of now. So each member of our canine unit is assigned a police service dog, which we refer to as a PSD. And all the dogs in the unit are trained in patrol and detection portfolio. And that will be either narcotics, explosives, or firearms. So as of October this year, we have 3 police service dogs trained in narcotics, 2 police service dogs that are trained in explosives, and we just trained up 2, my dog and Constable Joe Visa's dog, in firearm detection. And I am the in-service trainer, so I'm in charge of all the training, certification, and we do that twice a year. So 7 total general police service dogs, and that's including myself. So just a little introduction on the dogs here. We got our pictures up and their years of service. So this is Constable Campbell with his police service dog PSD Atlas, and he's a narcotics patrol dog. And he's been a police officer for 14 years, and he's been a handler since 2020. And next to the right is Constable Wiley with his police service dog Rudy. He's a 12-year member of the police service, and he's also been a handler since 2020. And then down at the end is Constable Rob Vijay with his police service dog Ranger. He's been a police officer for 10 years and a handler since 2020. And our explosive dogs, Constable Weglin with his police service dog Maverick. He's a 15-year member of Niagara Regional Police, and he's been a handler since 2019. And our last bomb dog, our senior dog in the unit, is Constable Van Reel with police service dog Jax, and he's a 15-year member of the police service, and he's also been a handler since 2019. So these are our 2 senior handlers in our canine unit, and we rely heavily on them as well to help out the new guys. But as you can see, we have a fairly junior unit with our most senior guys starting in 2019. And then myself, Sergeant Vandersbeck, I've been a police officer for 24 years, and I started my canine career with Peel Regional Police in 2005. And I started in the canine unit here in February of 2024. And then last but not least, Constable Joe Visa with his police service dog Duke. He's been a police officer for 8 years with Niagara Regional Police and handler since 2021. So all these dogs you see here are either German Shepherds or Belgian Malinois. And we select those dogs because they're the all-around athlete. They can do everything that we ask them to do. Where some dogs, say a bloodhound, might have more scent ability, these dogs can do all the jobs that we do because we need to have them tracking, assisting ETU, detection. They can just do everything that we need them to do. So joining the Niagara Regional Police Canine Unit, the police service dogs are selected by myself after an extensive test for suitability. So I'm testing for, I want the dog that will search the longest independently without the help for anybody. So just to describe that test, we'll throw a ball out in the field and then bring the dog in, and I don't even care if the dog finds the ball. I just want the dog that searches for the ball the longest without looking at any human for help. Their task is to go out and search until they find it. So I want that really strong, intense, independent search drive. Another thing we look at is environmentals, so shiny floors, stairs. We want to find those problems before we select the dog, so we don't find that when we're teaching the course back home. And then aggression to other dogs. We'll have them bring them out around other dogs to see how they are towards other dogs, because we can't be working our dogs and then they see another dog and they totally turn off what they're doing, and their main goal is to bark louder at the other dog. So we get most of our dogs from Europe, and we do that because in Europe they breed for the working lines. In North America they tend to breed for the show lines. So that's why most of our dogs come from Europe. They usually get sent to a depot down in the States where they have 20 to 30 dogs for us to look at a time. And we usually try and look at those dogs as soon as they get from Europe, so they don't have time to acclimatize to the place where they're at, because we want to see them fresh and not being brought into the buildings and areas that they have down there, because then they get used to it. I want to see them as soon as possible so I can see the true form of the dog. And then also the grip. and bite work. We also look at that, and we want a full firm grip, and we want that so that there's less injuries. For a dog that goes in full, there's very little injuries, and a dog that will like just grab onto a little bit and pull, it's actually a weaker bite, but it causes way more injuries. So we want a confident dog that has a full mouth and pushes into the person. And for liability reasons later on, it causes way less injuries, if any. Now the handler selection, you have to be a first-class constable. You have to provide a resume and cover letter. You have to do a pretty strenuous fitness test. You have an interview, and you also have to do a psychological examination. After that, you do an 18-week basic canine handlers course and a certification test in all the things that we've trained on. So yeah, each new team does 18 weeks. It's held in-house, but we also train with other services because canine is about learning. You don't want to stay under your umbrella. You want to try new things and go out to new people and different trainers. If as a canine trainer I say that I know everything, that's the time for me to quit because you're always learning and you're always willing to pick up new information and skills from other people. And yeah, so throughout the course, both the handler and the dog are taught the basics of canine handling. And every team completes a mandatory certification test twice annually to ensure that the team is performing to the highest standard. So we just finished our fall certifications, and we added something new in this year where we did nighttime scenarios, and we added in the drone capabilities as well. We just purchased 2 drones for our unit, and having canine and the drone work together is going to be a game changer, having eyes in the sky and thermal and being able to, before sending the dog out for safety reasons, send the drone out and have it over top. It's going to be a game changer in the canine world. So we just purchased 2 of those drones, and our first officer is getting trained up in November. And my goal is by the end of the year to have all the officers trained up as a drone operator as well. So our chain of command, the unit is located within emergency services, and we work in close consultation with ETU and Marine. And the members abide by General Order 077, and we report to the Staff Sergeant of the Emergency Services. So our bread and butter is backing up the officers on the road patrol, but we also do a lot of work with ETU. So our day-to-day operations, the handlers work a rotating 6-week schedule. We're only mandated to have coverage from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. So if anybody is sick or injured, we have to take the day shift dog down to cover the night shift. So we do have a lot of days if somebody's injured or sick or on course where we don't have day shift coverage because we have to have the 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. And normally, one team is working the entire region. So they're covering the entire Niagara region from 7 p.m. at night till 5 in the morning. So handlers drive a specifically designed vehicle to ensure that the dog is safe and comfortable. So there's air conditioning and heat, and it's on a sensor, and if it gets too high, we get an alarm. The windows go down for safety of the dog, because we put a lot of money into these dogs, and we want to take care of them. The teams regularly attend warrants with ETU and the detectives within the Niagara region, and approximately 1,800 calls per year is what we're kind of averaging. These are the 2023 numbers. So the job for canine never ends with training. You do that 18-week basic canine handlers course. You are continuously training because you're your own expert of your own dog, and we can't speak the dog's language. We have to interpret their behavior. So that's why we're always training with our dogs, so we know their behaviors that they give us, and we observe when we're tracking, and that's how we know if they're on the right track or the wrong track or doing the right thing. So continue with the day-to-day operations. All police service dogs come home with their handlers and live at home with them. And as you can see on the picture here, they're provided with a temperature-controlled house and confined to an area here. It's usually about a 4x8. They're working so hard during the day and during their shift, they don't need a large area to run. That's just enough for them to stretch their legs and relax, but they can go in and they can go out. And the handlers are responsible for ensuring that the dogs remain in good health, including daily exercise and regular vet checkups. So canine is a resource. So tracking, like I said before, is our bread and butter. And tracking, I'll get into, I think, the next slide, but tracking is following human scent on the ground, and an open area search or a building search is following human odor in the air. So when they're following human odor on the ground, it's a single scent, and in the air, it's any human scent that they're looking for. So we do, missing or lost persons, wanted persons, building searches, open area searches, ETU searches, and the narcotics, the detection, explosives, drugs, and firearms, as well as handler protection. So the dog is taught to protect his handler if he's in need. So like I was saying before, tracking is following the human odor on the ground. And German Shepherds, we use the olfactory sensors in our brain for scent. Humans do as well. So a human has approximately 5 million olfactory sensors in their brain. A German Shepherd Belgian Malinois has 225 million. So 5 million to 225 million. That's why we use the dog, because of their nose, right? So we're always losing dead skin cells when we're walking around. They're continuously, if you saw in a microscope, they're continuously falling around and leaving a trail. When you walk in vegetation or crushed grass, the dead skin cells create a track they call it a scent signature trail, where the dead skin cells and the crushed vegetation provide a track for the dog to follow. That can be on hard surface as well, but it doesn't last as long because the crushed vegetation allows for it to hold on, and weather can affect that as well. So pouring rain will wash it all away. The heat will burn it up, but a little bit of rain and dew will actually hold it in and actually allow it to last longer. So it depends on the weather about how long we can acquire a track. So it's a handler's responsibility to lead the canine to odor. So when the officers go to the call, they want to talk to the direct witness so they don't have information passed along, and they want to know, where did this person step? I want to get started on the right track so I'm not tracking somebody else. And their job is to follow the odor to source. When they start on a track, they're trained to follow the exact scent and not take crosstalks along the way. Now, that's not saying you're going to track somebody out of the Penn Center with thousands of people. But in the right conditions, a couple people walking over your track, they should be able to distinguish and stay on that track till the end of the track. Just some statistics from 2023. So successful deployments there, could be anything, articles, narcotics, and then the last one is criminal arrests. So in 2023, the NRPS Canine Unit deployed police dog service 460 times, including 100, so that's not, they had many more calls than that, that's just the times the dogs got deployed. 135 times to assist the ETU unit. Of those, 88 deployments were successful in locating people, narcotics, or evidence. And in 2023, the unit was integral in locating people on 68 occasions, detecting over 55,000 in illegal narcotics, and assisting in facilitating arrest of 87 people. Unfortunately now, with the rise of fentanyl in our community, and it's not just our community, it's every community, the dogs with that super sniffer also affects with fentanyl. So if we get a call for a drug search right now, the first question we ask is, do you suspect that there's fentanyl there? And if there is, we're not putting the dogs in there because we invest way too much money for them to overdose with the amount of fentanyl that's out there. So our drug searches have gone down dramatically over the last couple of years. And like I said, in the majority of the instances, the people and evidence would not be located by the members without having canine there. And just a few clips of in the news here. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Sergeant Vanderspeck. That's a great presentation. I have a quick question first. Did you mention how long the length of service of the dog is?
So we get the dogs between, the last two dogs we purchased, we got them at 11 months and 12 months. That's pretty young, but they were mature enough that we could work with them. We want to get 5 to 7 working years out of the dog. If we get more, that's great, but our goal is to get 5 to 7 working years out of that dog. But we have injuries, stuff happens, but we try for that 5 to 7 year mark.
Perfect, thank you. Board members, any questions? Member Kiokio and then Member Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation, thank you. Just one question I have. I know that we're looking in our budget this year for a couple more staff people in your department. So what are some of the challenges that you're facing right now with the K-9 unit?
Well, the challenge we have 6 members right now. We had the same amount of members almost 25 years ago. The region has definitely gotten much bigger since then. They're covering it. Like I said, one dog is covering the entire region. And unfortunately, the dogs are not a robot, and we can't plug them in and recharge them up. So these guys are continuously every night doing 10 to 15 calls, driving around the region, and their dogs, these dogs get tired. So it would definitely benefit to have another partner at least working, so you got 2 dogs working at a time. And so we're not burning these dogs out, because like I said, we spend a lot of money, and we're trying to get 5 to 7 years out of them. But when they're going every single night, 10 to 15 calls, some of these tracks can go up to 8 kilometers. And as soon as they're done 8 kilometers, they got to go to the other side of the region and do another one. The dogs are spent sometimes. So I got a hard working bunch of guys that really enjoy what they're doing. And the dogs are doing really well, but we definitely do have restraints with the amount of area we got to cover and with one dog.
So it sounds like to me it could burn out for both dogs
For sure.
and staff. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Gibson?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Speaking about the money invested, ballpark, what do they cost to buy a dog? The second question, during their 18-week training, if a dog washes out, what do we do with that dog?
Okay. So the initial cost for the dog, the last 2 dogs you purchased were $9,200 American. Then you have your 18 weeks of training, right? And we get them from a pretty big depot down in the States. And if the dog does not pass for health or trainability within that, I believe it's a year period, I can take that dog back and be given another one with no questions asked. So that's the reason it costs a lot, but there's guarantees in there that if it does not pass my course or has any kind of issues that we didn't see in the beginning or a health surprise that pops up, that I can take that dog back and no questions asked.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions? Vice Chair Kapasvanu?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. My question is around the dogs being taken home by their handlers. Now, are these dogs, when they're there, are they living under certain conditions in terms of, are they a family pet? And how does insurance kick in with that? Or they're not allowed to take them out as family pets and things like that?
Yeah, so they're a working dog, so they are not a family pet. And yes, they do go home to their families, but they're not in the house running loose with their families. That picture that you saw, the kennel there, when they're downtime, that's where they're chilling out in their kennel and their run there. The handler takes them for a walk every day or drives them out to field and runs them. But yeah, your wife or kids are not taking the police dog for a walk. There's just way too much liability for that with the amount of work and the things that they do.
Thank you.
That was a great question. Thank you. And board members, any other questions or comments? No, seeing none. Thank you, Sergeant Vanderspeck.
Thank you.
If I can have members Yip and Vice Chair Kapasvanu move that the presentation be received. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? No one's opposed, so that is carried. Chief, can I have you introduce the next presentation, please?
Thank you, Jeff. And it's my pleasure, Chair, to welcome Manager Stephanie Sabrin. Stephanie will provide a presentation with respect to the Citizens Police Academy that's in its first year of implementation.
Good morning. Thank you, Chief. Through you, Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share about the Citizen Police Academy. For some background, the Citizen Police Academies were first formed in the 1970s in the United Kingdom. We've seen many different services across North America, including right here in Ontario as well, start to implement them. The OPP, Toronto Police Service, London Police, Waterloo Police Service as well, Hamilton, Durham, Chatham-Kent have all implemented police academies in recent years as well. The aim of the Academy is really to allow an environment that will focus allow community members a unique insight into the policing profession with a focus on developing and strengthening relationships within our community as well. Many members will notice that we announced our first police academy in Police Week, which is back in the spring of 2024, with our first class session just starting this past September as well. You'll see here a group session, a group photo of our very first session. We were joined by Chief of Police Bill Forty to welcome everyone to the Academy and give us an overview of what was to come in the coming weeks. You'll also see Constable Phil Gavin as well, who has been leading this initiative from our unit. There's been an incredible level of engagement, especially as the weeks have gone on. Last night, I can share we were at the Emergency Services Building, where we were able to have one of our experiential learning nights, where the Police Citizen Academy members were able to experience various aspects, including marine underwater search and rescue, our emergency task unit as well, and get more of an immersive experience in terms of different areas of the service. When we look at the goals of the Citizen Police Academy, it's really not encouraged or intended to train or encourage community members to become police officers. If it turns into a recruitment piece, that's always an added benefit. But really the goal is to share what is going on within the service. The hope is that by giving community insight into police services and operations, residents have a better understanding of the services that we provide to the community, and the decisions that are made sometimes in times of crisis or emergency, and really gives an appreciation for the complexities of policing across the region and the daily operations of the Niagara Regional Police Service. Over the duration of the multi-week program, we have 8 weeks in total with a graduation ceremony. NRPS members also have the opportunity to interact with members of the community to answer their questions. There's plenty of time during the sessions to be able to have question and answer periods and allow members of the academy to kind of lead their learning as well. And it's an opportunity to provide community members with tools to be able to engage in community safety as well, and empowering them in that aspect, and really creates a community-based, knowledge-based champions as well, who are going out into our community and then sharing the work that our members are doing. Here you'll see session 1 as well, Police Chief Bill Forty making opening comments to our police academy. When we look at the program length of the academy, it is 8 weeks, as I mentioned. We have 1 night a week with our members. It really is, it's a lot of information that is coming at the academy participants as we're going through. We've done some tours through the building, some various areas coming in and speaking as well. Later in November, we will be doing a graduation night as well, where members of their families can come in and they can share that experience with them. In terms of leading the program, it has been led by the Corporate Communications Unit, and then the costs are, there's some collateral costs, including some overtime staffing, and then light water and snacks as well. When we look at who is participating in the academy, our first one, we did have over 100 applicants, with 21 selected from across our community. We had a selection panel, and a large effort was put into deciding and making sure that we had a vast representation across the Niagara region, various employment backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, age. There's quite a diversity in age as well, and it's been actually really fascinating to chat with the different people as to what brought them to the Citizens Academy, and there's really a wide range of reasons why people chose to participate as well. They do have to pass a criminal background record check, commit to the attendance, and then work or reside in the Niagara region as well. That was something important, that we were making sure that we were engaging Niagara residents. Some of the topics that we've covered, we've done patrol, a day in the life, to give an understanding of what our officers on the front line are doing. We've had the K-9 unit come in. Sergeant Vanderspeck came in and did a K-9 demonstration for our academy participants as well. Forensic services, we've had ICE come in. The training unit is another experience that we'll be doing in experiential learning, taking the academy participants out to the training unit to do some scenario-based exercises, as well as use of force training. We did a building tour through our headquarters here, traffic enforcement, and then recruiting as well is going to be speaking to some of our members. So when we look, here's some examples of various officers who have come in, and members of the service who have participated in the Police Academy so far. We have Detective Constable Steve Spink from our Forensic Service Unit, who is down in the lower left corner. Sergeant Vanderspeck, who you just heard from, as well as he was assisted off camera by Constable Kyle Weglin and Police Service Dog Maverick. We had Patrol, a day in the life, where we had Duty Officer Brian Rogers come in, accompanied by Sergeant Sean Donovan, Constables Andrew Sawatsky and Zarly Sina. And we've been receiving receiving feedback as well on a weekly basis from the community participants, which has been excellent as we try and shape and guide the program as we're kind of learning along with our Academy participants as well. One of the pieces of feedback I'd like to share is from one of our members who said, "I knew nothing about the field coming into this. It's been a great experience thus far, challenging my bias and having a better understanding of the careers of police officers." I also received an email just yesterday as well asking about the graduation ceremony, asking how many family members they could bring because we do have to have a bit of a cap. And they did share, it's so funny, one of the first questions that people asked is, "What do you get from it?" I really wish people could see it's not about receiving something tangible or a certificate. It's about building community, expanding our understanding of policing, and recognizing the good things that police contribute to our community. Staying informed and connected to what's happening around us is important, and I look forward to sharing that with my family. So that was a really valuable piece of feedback that we received just yesterday. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share about this community engagement initiative that we've launched within the service, and I welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you. That's a great presentation. Just a quick question for me is how often are we planning on presenting?
We're
this
hoping to do
opportunity?
it twice a year.
Twice a year? And is there an opportunity to increase the number of participants?
The problem with increasing the number of participants is you lose the one-on-one pieces. So from a capacity piece, we could, but then you start to lose the ability. We typically have 3 to 4 members of the NRPS involved running, and you lose the ability to be able to have those side conversations. And it just, I think you would lose some of the meaning of it if we started expanding it too broadly.
No problem. Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Vice Chair Kapasvanu and then Member Kiokio.
Thank you, Steph. I just have a question around the content of what the participants are learning, right? And how much of it is intentional in terms, I know it's about building relationships and making sure they understand what the cops do, what we do as a service, but how much of it is actually intentional in terms of answering the questions or the problems that we have with how community perceives what the police is doing? Okay, let's say, when you look at hate crimes, most people don't understand what, like, I called the police, they did nothing. And so how are we actually making sure that when they do come in, when the citizens come in, we are addressing some of the issues that the public or the community has with the police through the content that we are delivering?
Absolutely.
Pretty
So-
much a PR kind of.
Well, and very much, so when we chose the topics that we were going to be covering, and they have shifted a little bit as we move forward, we did tell the participants that the schedule could potentially change, and all of the topics that were shared are strategically picked. So we're ensuring that we're answering anything that is topical. Right now, the chief has mentioned that we do have a record number of homicides. We brought the homicide unit in to be able to talk to that. Our Stop Hate Niagara campaign is covered as well. So there's various aspects that we are choosing that are potentially time sensitive or topic of conversation as we're going, and ensuring that we're sharing that information as we can. We're also taking feedback from the members as well as to what is resonating and what isn't, and adjusting based on that.
Thank you. Member Kiokio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, great question. I guess mine kind of falls into that. My curiosity is, you stated that they stated a lot of reasons why they wanted to join the academy. And we've heard some outcomes of the responses on once they've finished the academy. So what were some of the big reasons they wanted to join the academy? Is it something that, that was stated just now, or I know there's a wide variety, but can you pinpoint something that stands out for you?
Absolutely, through you, Chair. When we were looking at the applications, we did have several members of the community who are interested in policing. So we did try to kind of balance that in terms of our selection panel of choosing some people who, they expressed a desire to understand policing a little bit better, and so we did have some people who expressed an interest in joining policing. We also had a lot of members. We have a retired member of our community who just wanted to better understand what the service is doing. A lot of people cited that, just trying to get a deeper understanding of what the police service is doing, what are the different services that are offered across the service, just to better understand. That was really kind of, which was encouraging from our standpoint, because that was the goal of it. So when we have people telling us that's what they're looking to come in to do, it really kind of met that expectation.
Just a quick comment. I think that's an excellent program of getting the word out to the people, especially people that take notice of what goes on with our police service. So I think that's excellent. So keep up the good work, and hopefully we can keep it going.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other member questions? No? Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
If I can have Member McKendrick and Member Steele move that the presentation be received. All those in favor? No one's opposed, so that's carried. Move on to, if we can move items 8.1 to 8.5 in block. If I can have Member Gibson and Yip move that the information be received. Questions or comments on those? Member Gibson?
I'd like to pull 8.2 for some questions.
8.2, Vice Chair Capus-Vanu?
I would like to pull 9.3 for some questions, please.
9.3 or 8, we're doing 8.1 to 8.5.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. That's 9.3.
So 8.2, and I have some questions about 8.1, so we'll start with 8.1 if that's all right. Chief, the question for you is, could you just please confirm that the extra 3 sergeants and the extra 3 pre-hires, I know we talk about this each time, but I just want to confirm, it's just a timing difference as far as for the authorized strength?
Thank you, Chair. It is a timing difference, and it also contemplates members that are out of the service on long-term either WSEB or non-occupational injuries, and our efforts to ensure that our operations are sustainable. So that it's a combination of both. You are correct.
Perfect, thank you. Member Gibson, if you can move on to 8.2.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Chief. I see some really big numbers in 8.2 and the overtime increases, 114%, 204% in different areas. Those items that we incurred those high numbers, I guess I'm wondering, are we budgeting for them for the next year to anticipate some more big raises like that, so that perhaps we're not 204% over and that sort of thing? Like, if we budget for it, the surprises that pop up every now and then that cost us $1 million. Are we budgeting for that in our new budget?
Yeah, thank you for your question, and through you, Chair. It's a good question. Yes, we are budgeting, and what you're observing is an increase in the complexity of crimes. And I can advise that we've had 12 homicides now that is not necessarily reflected. It will be reflected in upcoming quarterly reports. So you are right, you are seeing an increase, a significant increase in investigations, but also an increase in meeting our minimums on the front line. And it is part of the budgeting process.
Yeah, it's just be nice for future years that we kind of anticipate an extra X amount of money that we don't know is going to be needed to be spent, but it probably will when different things occur. So it'd be nice to not have to have these huge numbers as a 204% increase.
Thank you. And the other contributing factor is over the course of the last couple of years, emerging events that require the public order unit, deployment of the public order unit to events that take place across the region. We had a protest, we had the eclipse, we've had, community gatherings that have demanded an increase in our police response. So those types of things are contemplated as we go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question about it as well. So if I'm reading the report correctly, for example, in 2024, for the year to date, January to June, we had a total of 52,000 hours. And if I divide that by assuming that an officer's working 2,040 hours, that would require an extra 25 and a half officers. Is that correct?
If you considered 2,080 hours per member, you could do the math that way. I don't know that when overtime is incurred, it's incurred always in that way, but it is certainly one measurement when you consider what we call the shift relief factor. And that is when to have a police officer working 280 hours full-time, you actually need about 1.6 police officers. because of sick time, court time, training, other leaves that, annual leave, other things that contribute to actually having one full-time employee on the road at any time.
So if that's the case, then instead of the 25 officers, we could be looking closer to not quite 50, but, 40 officers that would be potentially, and again, I understand that it's not necessarily that they have to be here all the time, but to cover off even just minimums, there's 22,000 hours of minimums. So even if we just consider that, that's the base. So what I'm hearing is that from the overtime, we probably need more officers.
I think that's a fair comment.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any other questions or comments about 8.1 to 8.5? No, seeing none. All those in favor? No one's opposed, so that's carried. 9.1, if I can have Vice Chair Capizavanu and Member McKendrick move that the board adopt the draft bylaw as appended to the report effective October 31st, 2024. And further that the board chair and executive director be authorized to make any supplementary administrative amendments to the bylaw that may be required following an additional clarification of the CSPA and its regulations that may be received by the Ministry of the Solicitor General. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? No one's opposed, so that's carried. If I can have Member Steele and Member Kiokio move that the Niagara Police Service Board support the findings and approve the recommendations to the Services Procurement Card, the P-Card program, as detailed in Appendix 2 of the report. Questions or comments? I have a quick question. So I noticed, I'm glad to see that there's been a review, and I see that there's been a number of recommendations for the that are coming forward for 2025. It was for 2022 and 2023 that the report was basically written for. So my question is have we tested any of 2024's to see if we are still seeing the same trend? So we'll hear the same thing for 2020 in 2025 about the 2024 annual report is my question.
Thank you for your question. I will make a brief comment, and then I will invite Director Rouleau. She's the author of the report, and Director Rouleau is the person who sat down with our entire executive leadership team to provide us with constructive feedback on how we could ensure we were compliant with best practices.
So through to the chair. So to do a 1 year, actually a 2 year, it was very resource intensive. And one of the recommendations that we're putting forward is maybe not to do an annual review, but what we plan to do is do a 10% random sampling every month. And then on a biannual, so every 2 years, every card holder will be reviewed as well. And we're hoping that that will be done real time. The sample size should be smaller. It should be much more manageable for us. So instead of waiting years and then sort of doing a large review, we hope to do it on a regular basis and then address any of the non-compliance issues right then and there.
Perfect, thanks for that. I appreciate the comment from the chief saying that it's constructive. So I appreciate that. And then I also appreciate the fact that there is a lot of work involved in it. I do want to remind people that I think the P-card transactions, if I remember correctly, were 1.2 million, which is, I believe, about 0.5% to 1% of our entire budget. So it's not material in nature, but it is something that we're obviously being cognizant of when we're looking at our budgeting and making sure that things are spent appropriately. So thank you for that. So if there's no other questions or comments, all those in favor? No one's opposed, so that's carried. If I can have Member Gibson and Vice Chair Capizavanu move that the Niagara Police Service Board authorize the Chief of Police to prepare a memorandum of understandings and include a clause to adjust the funding for years 2026 and 2027 with an inflationary increase for Crime Stoppers of Niagara, the Christian French Child Advocacy Center, and Victim Services Niagara for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2025, and with the Niagara Safety Village for a 2-year term effective January 1st, 2025. Number 2, approve partnership funding for the 2025 operating budget at $50,000 for Crime Stoppers and Niagara Safety Village for $75,000, for Victim Services Niagara at 75,000 for Victim Services Niagara and 100,000 for the Kristen French Advocacy Center. Number 3, approve partnership funding for the 2026 operating budget at $25,000 for Niagara Safety Village, $50,000 for Crime Stoppers, and $100,000 for the Kristen French Advocacy Center, and $100,000 for the Victim Services Niagara. And number 4, approve partnership funding for the 2027 operating budget at $50,000 for Crime Stoppers and $112,500 for Kristen French Advocacy Center, and $112,500 for Victim Services Niagara. Questions or comments? Vice Chair Capasavanu?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think I've brought this question before, and I'm not sure I've had an explanation, or maybe there's something I missed and I don't understand, but I would really like to understand the origin of all this donating or funding all these agencies, and what kind of stewardship do we have? From my understanding, we don't even get reports as to financial year end reports as to how this money is being spent and whatnot. And I do not know what the justification is. There probably is one, but I would like to understand why we are funding Crime Stoppers and Kristen. I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be done, but I would like to understand how it came to be, why we are funding them every year. It's almost like they know they've got a check that's going to be signed every year, guaranteed, when other organizations out there have to actually go out and seek for funding. They've got a guaranteed paycheck coming every month. So can I just get an explanation as to how this is happening and why? And when does this get reviewed? Is this perpetual? Because it looks like they've been getting this funding ever since. And is there a time frame to when it will stop? What's the story there?
Perfect, thank you. Through you, Chief.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. I can advise that we have just put a process in place to demonstrate accountability with benchmarks, and I will invite Director Rouleau to provide additional information with respect to it. Vice Chair.
So through to the chair, your questions are similar questions to what we've asked in the past. There's a history to this, but at the 2024 budget process, the board did bring forward a request to staff to implement a funding framework for our agencies that we had been providing funding for a number of years. And you have received a number of reports that have led the progression to where we are right now. And one of the things that you're correct is there was really no substance or even background on as to why we were funding the programs. It was actually started back in the 2009 budget season when they were just added. And then through the period to where we are today, we were adding additional funding to get to our $275,000. So last year, the board asked us to actually put in this framework to address all of your concerns that you've brought forward. And so I'm hoping that the process that we implemented, the application process, asking each of the 4 agencies to bring forward an application demonstrating their alliance with our mandate through adequacy and effective policing. And we had a panel of 7 members of the service who actually sat in, and happy to say I was one of them, but I'm happy to say that the other members were actually operational members of the service that actually work side by side with these agencies. And so we asked each and every one of these 4 agencies those questions. You know, how do you align? How are you helping to support adequacy and effective? And what skills are you bringing to the forward to help us support that mandate? And as you can see through the report and in the appendices, we actually provided the board members all the information necessary for them to see how they responded to those questions. And then it was up to the panel, the committee, to determine the degree of alliances. I set up the scoring matrix, but I wanted to see how strong their alliance was to helping us provide adequate and effective policing. A lot of them were aligned more to the victim services. And as you can see, most of the 4 actually were strongly aligned. And so what they do is they help support the officers and the service primarily with victim services and those supports under the act that we're required to provide to the community. One of the 4 agencies didn't have necessarily a strong alignment, and that was the Safety Village. Theirs was more an education, and in my opinion, they aligned more with our newly formed foundation that is looking for programs to support that make our community safer. And so there was no attempt with this exercise to take away funding from anybody, but more appropriately align the funding to either the operating budget or to the foundation. And so we're hopeful that that will happen in the future, and that actually any of the 4 agencies also have an educational component, so they probably will also be able to apply to the foundation. But the process, and I'm happy that the board actually asked us to do it, because even from my perspective, I often wondered why we were providing the funding, but this exercise helped me to really understand the importance of what these 4 agencies provide and to the organization. Hopefully I've answered all the questions, but I'm happy to continue.
Vice Chair, does that answer your question? Thank you. Member Yip?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm just curious, and it could be in this report, and I'm just not seeing it, but particularly in terms of the services that Victim Services Niagara and the Kirsten French Children's Advocacy Center offer, it's always been my understanding that both of those agencies are supporting the work that the service is doing. And so my question is, if we weren't funding, and again, I'm just talking about those 2 agencies because I'm most familiar with them, if we weren't funding the work that they're doing, would that mean that we would have to be hiring new staff or investing in other resources, or however that looks?
Thank you for your chair or your question, and through you, Chair. I think that is a very fair comment. In fact, one of the things that we have discussed is whether or not the police should be having police-based victim services because of the need and the tie and connection to the victims that we're dealing with and victims in prosecutions that we're supporting. So I think if there was monies taken away from these agencies, there would be an immediate impact for us. I think that is a fair comment.
Sorry, Member Kiokio, you don't have a question now?
No, my question was answered.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? No one's opposed, so that's carried. If I can have Members Yip and Member Steele move that the Niagara Police Service Board receive and approve the proposed 2025 operating budget for the Niagara Regional Police Service and Board, resulting in a total net expenditure budget before indirect allocations of $216,958,546, and further that the consolidated budget of the service and the board be submitted to the Regional Council for approval. Questions and comments? Member Yip and then Member Kiokio.
Thank you. I'm just asking now because our executive directors, are we receiving a presentation before questions? I'm just curious.
Sorry,
why
yes,
it's
we're
being
having.
pulled. So we're going to have a presentation.
We're going to have a
ahead of time.
presentation.
Okay. I'm asking. I don't know if we are.
Chair, I can advise that I came thinking I was going to do a presentation.
Perfect, okay.
But I thought you might want a wash and break before I do that.
Yeah, there you go.
That's fair.
Yeah, well, we can start with the presentation. Thank you. We're going to recess for 5 minutes. If I can start to call the meeting to order, please. Thank you, and we'll go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. And to you and the board, thank you for providing me this opportunity to speak to you with respect to our proposed 2025 operating budget. As a team, as we started through this process, I can tell you that we came to more deeply understand our current situation, where we sit in terms of other police agencies, how far we are behind in some respects. I can share with you also that during that process, there was a lot of emotion demonstrated by our leaders, most of whom are here today, some of which ranged from disappointment to anger, frankly. I can share with you that we did not cut out our wants. We cut out our not-so-urgent needs. We have heard our members and the pressures that they're facing. There are things that I wanted to bring forward as part of this budget that are not being presented today, frankly, because of the current financial pressures that we as a service face, and we acknowledge that the region faces. There are costs associated with deferrals, though, not just financially, but also on the wellness of our members. While we have deferred for years, these investments today are simply not to just maintain status quo. As we know, status quo requires us continuing in what we know is an unsustainable model on the backs of our members, who are taking on increasing and more complex workloads than ever before. As we went through the budget process, it was an informative and exhaustive undertaking and an opportunity with the new senior command team in place to have meaningful, authentic conversations that included a risk analysis about the current and future state of the service. At the heart of these conversations was our desire to have a meaningful, community-centric service delivery model to ensure and enhance public safety, with a particular focus on continuous improvement, leadership, transparency, and community engagement and mobilization. To achieve this, we looked at it through a framework that is being utilized by services across North America, commonly referenced to as the frontiers of transformation. It is something that is being taught by academics at Harvard University. It is rooted in academic research, charting a transformational path to improve organizational capabilities and culture to enable positive community outcomes, to foster trust, with a fundamental understanding that the safety of every person in every community is integral to the wellness, social, and economic mobility that makes for a vibrant and thriving community. This framework allows us to assess the capacity of our organization, of your organization, surrounding our service delivery. Frontier 1 is focused on understanding where we are as an organization today, where we stand. It includes feedback that we have received from the community, from elected officials, and it references your strategic plan. It is mindful of the provincial adequacy standards. As part of that, we have tried to consult and listen to elected officials in a meaningful way. recognizing the value of strengthening our internal and external communication, which allows us to set the stage for meaningful transformation. Frontier 2, this is a deeper integration with community services. For instance, building upon the success of our community-oriented response and engagement unit, commonly known as CORE. Trying to understand and address the root causes of safety issues by having the ability to engage directly with the community. It involves the continued development of new policies and operational models that prioritize collaboration and empathy, particularly with historically marginalized communities. You recently supported the creation of our Indigenous liaison officers, an evolution of the work that our CORE and EDI units are doing to build a culture within the service that recognizes and supports the community's well-being and empowers members to tackle complex community challenges. Frontier 3 is really a future model that involves the pinnacle of transformation with public safety services fully community-centric, co-creating solutions with the community, integrating advanced systems for data sharing and analytics. We have just started populating the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan with crime data to enhance a broad community-centric approach, achieving long-term safety and well-being outcomes, reducing workload for frontline officers, and deepening trust within the community. Ultimately, this enhances the legitimacy of public safety organizations like ours more broadly. As we look at our current service delivery model, which the board would be familiar with, there's a lot of overlap. Districts overlap communities and lower tier governments. For instance, the city of Thorold is partly policed by one district and partly policed by 3 districts. Recognizing that we are building the service for the future, I put this graph in here to highlight the growth across the region. As you can see, the percentages are increasing and we are building for the future and to be well positioned to serve and protect communities that don't exist yet, but we know they're coming. Our service does not currently have a facilities master plan, but we have had preliminary discussions with the region about the creation of one, inclusive of integrating with other entities from the region and other emergency service providers like EMS and local fire departments. Storefronts, strategically positioned in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Pelham, Thorold, and Highway 24 in Lincoln, where Prudham's Landing is being developed, and we can anticipate thousands of homes being built in the coming years. Essentially, we would like to create a network whereby officers working across the region would be connected and therefore enhancing community safety and our service delivery. I would also like to draw your attention to this slide detailing our calls for service, which, as you can see, are projected to continue to increase on a go-forward basis. And I have asked and included a 5-year forecast by Dr. Perez demonstrating what we can see looking out into the future. You'll notice that the graph shows a considerable projected increase as we move forward. Now, I've chosen to also show you the Crime Severity Index from 2015 to 2023. As you can see, we did see a drop in 2019 going into COVID, which continued through 2022 after we added the 40 frontline officers. This underscores the value of adding resources. I should note, though, that now in 2024, as this board knows, we have now had 12 homicides, so you can expect that our Violent Crime Severity Index will increase this year. I would also like to point out the increase in calls, and those calls that are complex in nature. The information shown here is broken down to represent districts at the bottom, and the line at the top is the overall number. When we look at the proportion of calls for domestic, mental health related calls, armed and barricaded person calls, we observe how they consume a substantial number of resources, inclusive of both first responders or patrol officers and follow-up investigators. For example, regarding domestic violence, in 2023, we received approximately 6,500 calls for service. This is almost 18 calls per day. The median time for a call for service is typically 3 hours. Another example is mental health-related calls. In 2023, we received 9,435 calls for service, which is almost 26 calls for service per day. The median time of this type of call is 6 hours. Lastly, armed and barricaded calls. In 2023, we received 883 calls for service, or an average 2 per day, with a median time to resolve a call of this type averaging 7 hours. I would add, though, that that is the median time, and that in many calls there is more than one investigator required and follow-up investigation, so the total number of calls is much greater than that. And I have those numbers, which I can provide if you like. In spite of these pressures, the service has demonstrated strong performance in maintaining a relatively low crime severity index and adapting to modern policing challenges. There are clear indications that our current staffing and operating models require ongoing reevaluations by our corporate analyst and the Office of Corporate Strategy and Innovation, who are also here today. The growing gap between the number of police officers and the population we serve, combined with the extensive geographic area that the service patrols, highlights the need for a more strategic approach to resource allocation. Additionally, the lower weighted clearance rates and higher number of criminal code violations per officer suggest that workload pressures may be impacting investigative outcomes. To ensure that we continue to provide effective service and address evolving community needs, it is essential to analyze current workloads, staffing models, and operational strategies. This will not only enhance crime-solving capabilities, but also ensure that we can manage the demands of both residents and the millions of tourists that come to our region each year. As we look at the data against our comparators, you will see that we are in the middle of the pack. Our contemporaries are all increasing their number of police officers and investigators. They are making significant investments this year. Frankly, they're making even greater investments than we have put forward to you today. That means that we will see displacement of crime into our communities unless we also prioritize and invest in public safety. Also, if other services are better funded, therefore creating better work environments, our people could move. They could go to better, well-positioned police services. Some regional councillors will ask us how we compare to other services. This slide demonstrates how much police services have grown in the last 23 years with data compiled and pulled from Stats Canada. Looking at the compilation of the service overall, inclusive of both our sworn and civilians, you'll see Niagara has grown 22%, with our next comparator growing at 60%, York at 119%. When we look at the region in a snapshot, we see the population forecasted to be over 530,000 people in 2025, not including the tourism influx with a considerable land and water policing area that our members actively patrol and also respond to calls for service on. Our waterways also require police resources, with our marine unit actively patrolling 1,500 square kilometers of waterway. In addition, the 3 border crossings, and 4 if you include the Whirlpool Nexus Bridge, provide additional challenges along with the demand created through tourism to the region. Our efforts to ensure a safe border contribute to the $100 billion in trade that flows across the Niagara region's borders every year. We also need to consider the impact of non-residents. On top of the tourism influx, 30,000 students and staff affiliated to Brock University and Niagara College, as well as seasonal residents living in a number of municipalities, such as Shirkston Shores and Fort Erie. Niagara is an aging community, a retirement destination for those in larger cities, for instance, Toronto. And we continue to see an influx of new international residents and students. Given the beauty of the region, Niagara is also host to a number of special events, including cultural activities and festivals. Seasonal festivals like Canal Days and the Niagara Wine Festival, the Shaw Festival, and is a desirable destination to celebrate Canada Day and New Year's Eve. Like other police services, our levels of service change and vary. Our calls for service have continued to rise, and we continue to adapt to evolving trends and challenges such as human trafficking, opioid enforcement and education, increasing mental health calls, those who are unhomed, and other quality of life related occurrences, for instance, encampments. Building on the framework of transformative leadership and taking into account the factors that make Niagara unique, we identified the investments in continuous improvement that we're putting forward in the 2025 operating budget. They are principally focused on community safety, right-sizing our organization, compliance with emerging legislation, the wellness of our members, building in an organization that is intelligence-led, in essence, modernizing our service so that we are well-positioned to use emerging technologies. And finally, leadership. First, as an investment in community safety, as we recognize and respect the pressures on the members working on the front line. Page 175 of your package contains the business case. Board members have received the Managing Patrol Performance Report and a supplemental report prepared by the Office of Corporate Strategy and Innovation. The Managing Patrol Performance Report is essentially a workload study where we have looked at shift relief factor. The supplemental report, based on academic research from the University of Michigan and used by other police agencies across Canada and North America, looked at the agency relief factor, commonly known as the ARF, taking into account the current 12-hour shifts and the workload that we have. We have taken the conservative side, not saying that we won't be back in future years asking for more. Two different reviews that are focused on measuring workload and response times while assuring the current and future state of our resource needs. Both studies were done with very conservative estimates, and we have identified the need for 33 additional officers on the front line. Part of that will include an increase to our community-oriented response and engagement unit, or as I previously referenced, our core unit, while also ensuring that we have enough members to respond to calls for service and to comply with the obligations of our collective agreement. This will allow us to adopt a stratified response to ensure that we have members available to look at and focus on prolific offenders, problematic locations, high crime locations and call types, to be intelligence-led and address emerging community issues, drawing on the strengths of our criminal analysis program. In other words, to move to be proactive in nature and not simply reactive. Also under the umbrella of community safety, as you heard this morning from our dog handlers, we are requesting the addition of 2 canine officers and dogs. Again, this is something that is referenced within the provincial adequacy standards. As you just heard from Sergeant Vanderspeck, the current staffing of the unit forces members to work a complex schedule that doesn't align with the front line, thereby creating gaps that means coverage is at times lacking across the region. An additional 2 canine officers would allow the deployment of 2 handlers per platoon to ensure coverage across the region, improving response times overall and compliance with adequacy standards. The schedule that they currently operate on is a flex schedule, which means that they adjust based on the daily needs of the unit. I would like to tell you, or provide you an example, that one of the members with a young family worked nights for 9 straight weeks this summer to address the needs of the unit. If a member is sick or injured, others adjust their schedule accordingly to ensure coverage. The dedication and flexibility of the members in this unit is what ensures ongoing coverage across the region, which is simply not sustainable. Sergeant Vanderspeck spoke about the adequacy standards to have coverage from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., and he also referenced the fact that they were part of 135 emergency task force deployments. As you can imagine, a lot of those take place during the day, where in a controlled environment, our investigators will try to search or enter high-risk locations with the benefit of sunlight for the safety of everybody involved. So their schedules are very demanding. I can also tell you that when they came to present to us, myself, Deputy Chief Wasilevich, Superintendent Mazzotti, Inspector Hodges, asked for an immediate meeting with them because we were so moved by their commitment to duty and so concerned about the risk that they're at. As you can imagine, you see on the slide there, a dog handler and the dog running through a field. Picture that handler and the dog running at night. They're highly susceptible to injury. They're also, they need time, their dogs need time off and they need time off. Under the current schedule, I talked about the shift relief factor. There's no relief for them, and it's an organizational risk for us and for them. This business case, sorry, I'm going off my script, asks for 2 members. Frankly, if I thought that we had the ability to hire 6 to provide for relief and coverage, if we could operationalize that this budget, that's what I would have been coming for. I don't believe we can do that, so I've only asked for 2. And I was going to provide an example, but I think Sergeant Van der Speck provided examples this morning of the type of work that they do. I know last week alone there was an incident where a young man left his house with a knife to commit to with a view of taking his own life, and one of the handlers tracked him for 90 minutes and found him in a field, and essentially may have saved that young person's life. So the work that they do is remarkable, and they're a tremendous, I don't want to call them an asset, but they're a tremendous tool for public safety, to enhance public safety. I'll move on. With our ongoing commitment to public safety, there are obviously going to be considerable recruitment efforts needed, and couple that with a steady rate of attrition. We also need to address right-sizing our organization in several support areas, including our human resources unit. Currently, there is 1 member responsible for all permanent and temporary civilian staffing actions for the entire service, which is a single point of failure. The addition of a talent acquisition specialist reporting to the current talent acquisition coordinator would increase efficiency in internal and external job postings, shortening that process and continuing to make the service an employer of choice. In an increasingly competitive market, the specialist would be able to focus on recruitment, while the coordinator would then be able to focus on strategic initiatives related to the staffing function. I would also add that this is also keeping with the recommendations made by an external consultant that the service retained, Deloitte, in 2022, where they identified a process for us to modernize our HR unit. And this is in keeping with the recommendations of that consultant report. In addition to right-sizing human resources, we also need to right-size our corporate communications unit. With a growing appreciation and reliance on brand management, as well as commitment to timely, accurate, and accountable information to our community, the role of the corporate communication unit has continued to evolve, and the work is outpacing the current staffing capacity. Members of the board will recall last year the ask for a social media visual content creator that was in fact deferred. When compared to other police agencies of similar size, our corporate communication unit has fallen behind in staffing. Comparatively, Waterloo Police have 9 persons operating within the corporate communications unit, while Durham also has 9, Halton has 7, and are currently asking for another this budget cycle. I had an opportunity to speak with Chief Tanner last night. York has 14, and Peel consists of 27. The corporate communications specialist would support the corporate communications manager, while the visual content creator would work alongside the corporate communications technician. Both current civilian positions, the manager and technician within the unit, are also each a single point of failure. Additional resources would allow for cross-training to ensure we are able to maintain functions whenever one person is out of the workplace or is on leave. With the increase of violent incidents in the Niagara region, in addition to an increase in investigative capacity, day-to-day emergent media relations requirements are taking the majority of the focus of the unit. Combined with the existing substantial workload of day-to-day media relations as well as corporate communications, the unit is struggling to provide timely information to the public and community partners, which is limiting the ability to engage in strategic, proactive, community engagement and public safety initiatives. Initiatives like the one that was presented on earlier today, whereby we initiated the Citizens Police Academy. Well, we also have a goal of introducing a youth academy. So those are the types of things that corporate communications is taking a lead on. So they're oftentimes difficult to measure, but they're very important to the community and positive reputation of the service and the board and the policing sector in general terms. Additionally, as the service grows, so does the demand on our IT department. The investment would add one equipment support technician to support hardware deployment to members across the service. Given the growth and diversity of hardware types used across the service, the demand placed on the current single technician is unsustainable. With the ongoing rollout of the Connected Officer program, that demand is only increasing with the passing of time. We did explore the possibility of contracting out in this particular area, as well as trying to identify efficiencies. However, there is a need for a reliable, consistent, and dedicated person in the role to ensure hardware replacement cycles are kept on track. When looking at options, I can tell you that we've spoken with the region, and the region does not have the capacity to be able to support any additional IT functions, and contracting out is also not an option due to security limitations, which would require the service to have a full-time member accompany the contracted person at all times within the building. Also of note, this again was a position that was deferred in the last budget, and there's been an increase in this, there has not been an increase in this particular job function since 2002. That is 22 years. When we look at legislative compliance, and I know the board is well aware of the impact of the Community Safety and Policing Act and the impact it's had on the service, on our training unit. I know we've attended several conferences. Some of us are attending an event next week to try to better understand it. The implementation of the training regulations under the Act presents a considerable challenge that cannot be adequately met without increasing the capacity of the unit. You will recall that last year, Member Steele, he advocated for the region to allocate reserve funding to address this emerging pressure, which was ultimately, after several discussions, approved by council, so thank you, Member Steele. This investment of 1 sergeant and 6 constables has already been put forward to the board in 2024 through the use of those reserve funds. The mid-year adjustment was necessary to ensure compliance with the Act and expansion of training to involve mental health crisis response, immediate rapid deployment, C8 patrol carbine, incident command and incident management systems, special constable training, as well as the potential additional intake of a 5th intake that is being contemplated by the Canadian Police College, or Ontario Police College, I apologize, to deal with emerging pressures across the province. This increase in staffing will annualize this growth, ensuring that all sworn members complete the required qualifications and annual refresher training in a timely manner, preventing any disruptions to the delivery of adequate and effective policing in the region. One of the service's strategic priorities is member wellness. We spend a lot of time talking about this and trying to create a better work environment for our people so they can better serve the communities. This investment in member wellness would add a health and wellness coordinator to the Member Support Unit. The coordinator would be responsible for initiatives to address high-stress environments, reduce absenteeism, and improve productivity. Additionally, they would promote a culture of well-being and family support and social networks. As a key component of the board's strategic plan, this dedicated person would allow the Member Support Unit to further enhance member wellness and resiliency. The Wellness Coordinator position has been implemented in many police services across the province, including London, Peel, who have 2, York, Hamilton, Guelph, Chatham-Kent, and Waterloo. Many benefits associated with this position have been identified during these discussions with the other police agencies, and all of which have had a positive impact on the health and wellness of their members. Moving to investigations of vulnerable persons. The investment in the Domestic Violence Unit would see the addition of a staff sergeant, 3 sergeants, and 4 detective constables. And this is referenced on page 204 of your board package. Recognizing the significance of domestic violence, the Niagara region declared intimate partner violence an epidemic in 2023. It was noted then by our community partners that the declaration was a call to action, a commitment to allocate financial and human resources to address this issue. When we looked at the current staffing of the unit, it was quickly determined that it is not adequate or effective. The addition of a staff sergeant and sergeant would provide proper oversight. The volume of calls, complexity and length of investigations, the demands of judicial proceedings, the intricacies of securing judicial authorizations or search warrants, the needs of our community partners in proactive monitoring of high-risk offenders has outgrown the capacity of the current staffing model. When compared to other agencies that are considered our comparators, you'll see a stark spike in the number of investigations per detective. For example, in Niagara, we see 500 calls for service per investigator. When you look at Durham, one of our comparators, they're 280. You can see a further breakdown on page 94, Appendix 3 of the budget package that you've been provided. Further, this is the only mandatory charge policy as per the ministry, where police officers have to lay criminal charges in domestic violence cases if they have reasonable grounds to believe that violence has taken place. There's no discretion allowed in this area. I would be remiss if I didn't also highlight that these additional resources, bringing the total number in the unit to 21, still leaves us behind our provincial comparators. For instance, Waterloo has 30, Durham 27, and Halton 23. This is one of the units when they came in and presented to us. If you recall, when I provided my opening comments, there was a lot of emotion, or there was emotion shown. The conversation around the room, which consisted of the senior leaders, the superintendents, directors, deputy chiefs, and myself, the question asked around the table was, how do we allow this to happen? Lastly, with respect to our domestic violence unit, there's not been a single increase in personnel in the unit in the last 13 years, and that is when the adequacy standards came into place. This is despite legislation, and this is despite case law that has a direct impact on investigating domestic violence. You might think that, you might ask yourself, maybe technology can assist in these investigations. However, technology is only providing more platforms and more avenues for the perpetuation of violence and related abuses of oftentimes vulnerable persons. Further, as we look at our district detective offices, with the continued growth in 3 and 8 districts, serving Welland, Pelham, Lincoln, West Lincoln, and Grimsby, we also observe that the workload has outpaced the staffing capacity which is currently in place. The addition of 2 detective constables in the 8 district detective office would ensure investigative efficiency, the ability to address community concerns, and alleviate the high level of operational stress being felt by the detectives working in the unit. In 3 district, the addition of 1 detective constable to the street crime unit would also address community concerns associated with emerging street-level crimes. Things like break-and-enters, thefts, thefts of property, those are all the types of things that are investigated by these detectives, and we have seen them have some significant success on some cat burglars who were breaking into homes at night in Welland and Pelham in the last couple of months. A significant violation, although it's a property crime, it's a significant violation of someone's sense of security and safety. In the spring of 2025, I'm now speaking to the area of modernization. In the spring of 2025, Transport Canada will be implementing requirements in relation to remotely piloted aircraft systems, or commonly known as drone deployments for police purposes. And I know Member Steele spoke about some of the complexities of that in a previous meeting. Under this legislation, or under these requirements by Transport Canada, an RPAS coordinator, also known as a drone, would be mandatory in order for the service to continue to utilize drones. And this is referenced on page 215 of the board package that was provided to you. If this role is not in place, the service would potentially be held liable for any infractions related to improper reporting procedures, flight logs, or any other breach during an operational deployment. As we look at the modernization of policing, drones play a significant role in ensuring community safety, from quickly locating vulnerable missing persons to enhancing community and member safety in tactical deployments. You heard Sergeant Vanderspeck talk about them also this morning. It should also be noted that under the new act, the Community Safety and Policing Act, it is mandated that every public order unit, tactical hostage rescue team, and explosive unit shall be provided with a drone. This investment would ensure consistency and proper oversight of drone usage across the service, as well as compliance with the Act and the incoming Transport Canada regulations. It would also position us to examine other applications of drone technology in the coming years, which would inevitably enhance public safety and our service delivery. In addition, in building this unit, we will also be repurposing an identified position from elsewhere in the service to be a civilian specialist within the unit as additional support. By introducing a civilian into this, we also ensure consistency and sustainability in the service, in the implementation of this on a go-forward basis. Under the umbrella of modernization again, digital evidence management, you'll be familiar with the term DEMS. It's been discussed several times in these meetings. It's at the forefront of every discussion. Phase 1 of the DEMS unit coincided with the implementation of 5 automated license plate readers, or ALPRs, in 2023, and they were deployed into our traffic services, traffic enforcement unit cars. Moving forward, an additional 97 ALPRs were purchased with provincial grant monies and installed in cruisers for frontline patrol, along with in-car cameras and eventually body-worn cameras, in which we'll hear more about a bit later. The Connected Officer program will allow for the collection of digital evidence, such as crime scene photos and video, along with both audio and video statements. The addition of 2 DEMS clerks is necessary to manage the sheer volume of evidence that will be captured using this technology, with the requirements of timely disclosure as per the Supreme Court of Canada Regina versus Jordan ruling, which has provided a very tight timeline for matters to proceed to court. We have had expressed direction from Crown that if we fail to meet our disclosure guidelines, this information will go public and we will be highlighted for this failure. Cases will be dismissed, which will result in criticism of police, which could lead to the erosion of public trust and confidence in our service. Finally, leadership. Although this is the final program change I'm bringing forward this morning, it's really the foundation as we look to build the service of the future and move our organization forward. As we invest across the service, we need to also ensure that we are investing in our senior leadership team. Through the studies, span of control was one of the areas that we looked at to ensure we have adequate supervision and leadership across the service. Specifically, the creation of a third deputy chief to oversee community services. The revised organizational structure will strengthen community policing efforts, forge collaborative relationships, and develop strategies in alignment with the new Community Safety and Policing Act. Earlier today, the board memorialized its commitment to community-centric policing in its administration of the police services in the board policy just approved. This is in direct alignment with this commitment and governing directive of the board. This will not only address local issues, but also improve relationships between police and the community. Several academic research studies highlight the effectiveness of community policing in reducing serious crimes, such as break and enter, drug use, and robberies. One prime example of these studies includes the stratified policing model developed by Drs. Roberto and Rachel Santos, which seeks to facilitate organizational transformation within police services to reduce crime and increase public safety. The model is based on the principles of problem-oriented policing, intelligence-led policing, and community policing. The addition of the 4 new senior officers that form part of this submission would support this model and also enhance public safety in Niagara. For example, the Deputy Chief of Community Services would align with the tactical and strategic layers of the model by overseeing both the short-term immediate needs and the long-term relationship building needed to enhance community safety. I can tell you that other police services, inclusive of London, Halton, and Waterloo, have all added an additional deputy or senior officer to their organizational structure in the recent months. And if I could, I can refer you to page 112 and Appendix 3 of the budget package, where you'll see further data with respect to this submission. The addition of a superintendent would uncouple investigative and emergency services to ensure proper oversight and leadership on high-risk, high-priority investigations. Currently, one superintendent oversees both of these areas, with a massive span of control that is challenging, as both areas are busy, unique, and pose liability for the community and the service should an investigation or other critical police action be compromised. On one hand, investigative support services has involvement in major investigations, which include homicides, sexual assaults, child abuse, human trafficking, domestic violence, major drugs and covert operations, just to name a few. On the other hand, emergency services has additional involvement in ensuring emergency responses to critical incidents are supported in the best possible way. This is to ensure a successful result can be achieved in a hostage-taking, armed, barricaded person, suspected explosive device. We had this scenario play out on Tuesday, where our emergency tactical unit was deployed, inclusive of the inspector. Marine rescue operation, emergent searches for missing children and elderly persons, traffic enforcement, and fatal motor vehicle collisions. Currently, as both areas of command sit under one superintendent, the span of control is too vast and too diverse, providing inadequate oversight. Due to time constraints and the heavy workload of this position, the nature of the work tends to be more transactional and limits the time for visionary initiatives which would enhance our service delivery. Additionally, as the population grows, with a consistent increase in calls for service, the number of members in emergency and investigative areas of the service also continues to grow, further increasing the span of control and the risks for the organization. With respect to the inspectors, at the moment, the Inspector of Emergency Services oversees highly specialized units, including Emergency Task Unit, Underwater Search and Recovery, the K-9 Unit, Collision Reconstruction, and Traffic Enforcement. This area of command involves managing preparedness and response to critical incidents that are challenging, unique, and often face public scrutiny. And we have seen an increase in these types of deployments in the last couple of years, one of which there was a protest across the road from this very building. Additionally, this inspector is a critical incident commander that oversees major incidents such as high-risk search warrants, arrests, armed and barricaded persons, and hostage rescue. In 2023, there were 58 such incidents that required the involvement of an incident commander. In 2024, as of the beginning of this week, there were 55, 56 if you add in the incident from Tuesday, that required the involvement of an incident commander, with one of those calls taking almost 24 hours to resolve. And if I could, I'd like to take an opportunity just to provide an example. A few weeks ago, you'll be aware, there was a planned high-risk takedown that involved the execution of several search warrants across the Niagara region, whereby a member of the Hells Angels was arrested and a clubhouse searched by way of judicial authorization or the execution of a search warrant, and our full team was deployed. While that operation was in the throes of being executed, we had an unexpected armed barricaded person incident arise, requiring the deployment of 40 frontline officers, significantly stretching our frontline and emergency service resources. And that's an example these are examples in the last couple of weeks. The span of control for this single inspector is also too vast and carries significant risk for the service and the board by extension. An inspector of emergency planning will oversee major event operations encompassing emergency management and public order, or has been done in other services throughout the service, as has been done by other services across the province. The remotely piloted aircraft system and police liaison team would also fall under the mandate of a major event operations unit. The population of the Niagara region continues to grow. This, combined with world affairs, has brought with it an increase in large-scale festivals, outdoor concerts, protests, and demonstrations. We have also seen how the border can now become a target in demonstrations. The creation of a major event operations unit would aid in developing an improved response to public safety incidents by constructing policy and processes and developing a sustainable management plan for future demonstrations, safely and effectively also ensuring that critical infrastructure in the region is safeguarded. Similarly, the inspector overseeing investigative services currently oversees over 150 members, the majority being specialized criminal investigators, but also our forensic technicians. This involves oversight of 3 distinct areas: major crime, intelligence, and special victim investigations. The addition of a second inspector allows for the alignment of major crime and special investigative services under one inspector, while special victims and forensics would be overseen by a second inspector called the major crime inspector. Both areas carry significant organizational risk and require enhanced, undistracted leadership and oversight. Having the investigative services inspector overseeing special victims and forensics would then allow for dedicated leadership and special attention in an area that also has a prominent level of organizational risk due to the victim-centric nature of these investigations and significant community partnerships. I won't spend a lot of time on the current org chart, but you'll see a considerable unbalanced load in the Deputy of Support Services. Looking at the future of the organization, with our desire to have a community-centric service delivery model, we have prepared a more balanced org chart that better aligns with our strategic plan, better aligns with the Community Safety and Policing Act, and better aligns with community expectations. 3 deputy chiefs, as depicted on the slide that's going to come next, create a more equitable division of oversight and responsibility as we move our organization forward. It would also then allow superintendents to engage in strategic, forward-leaning initiatives, able to engage in tactical leadership while maintaining appropriate oversight and mitigating risk. In summary, the organizational changes that I have proposed include realignment of existing organizational units to ensure streamlined operations, balance workloads, and facilitate community policing. Include four new senior officer positions to enable community-based policing and to ensure compliance with the Community Safety and Policing Act in terms of emergency readiness and preparation. Again, they are as follows: Deputy Chief, Community Services; Superintendent, Emergency Services; Inspector, Emergency Planning; and Inspector, Investigative Services. In addition to adding resources, we've also looked at where we can reallocate resources in our commitment to continuous improvement. For instance, at the end of 2023, the service was informed by the Ministry of the Attorney General that the John Sapinka Courthouse in Hamilton no longer had the capacity to hear our services, weekend and statutory holiday court, commonly referred to as wash court. As a result of the ministry decreed that effective January 1st, 2024, our service would be responsible for providing court security at a newly established wash court held at 59 Church Street in St. Catharines. This court would would hear all cases from Niagara, Brant County, Haldimand, Norfolk County, Brantford, and Six Nations. The service implemented a temporary solution in order to facilitate this requirement. However, a long-term solution is required. Courthouse security staffing requirements included one officer on overtime as well as two special constables for a 4 to 6 hour duration each day that a wash court took place. With the new requirement, as well as existing pressures on our central holding unit, inclusive of the video bail team, the Inspector Siri, the inspector in charge through Superintendent Forbes, requested us to increase to the current staffing complement, facilitating video bail from 4 to 8 members. An operational review of the existing special constables and their roles was undertaken to determine the most efficient and cost-effective manner to implement these changes. After careful analysis, it was determined that repurposing 4 full-time positions from the court service umbrella could be undertaken with limited additional risk to the service. This review and repurposing will allow the service to staff the wash court at 59 Church Street, providing operational benefits within Central Holding Unit and the video bail process. The association has been consulted through this process, and we are poised to implement these operational efficiencies. Also, currently in smaller districts, 8 districts, 6 district, and 5 district, we have sergeants, front desk, clerical staff, and temporary members performing a variety of administrative tasks, including vehicle maintenance and coordinating the moving of vehicles to and from our fleet services. This has led to inconsistency with vehicle inspections that has the potential to impact public and officer safety. We have met with the supply clerks who currently report to district commanders and advised them that we plan to reassign them to the materials manager who oversees fleet and quartermasters. Our continuous improvement initiative to pool the supply clerks under the umbrella of materials manager will ensure greater consistency and oversight for vehicle inspections and delivery of goods and services across all our districts. Will ensure that the service can cross coverage if one supply clerk is away or sick, and will also ensure the delivery of essential goods and services are being pushed out to all the districts, which thereby limits the need for a police officer to have to drive to quartermaster. And by reducing the need for them to have to go to quartermaster, we increase the time that they're on the road to deal with calls for service in their assigned patrol area. Looking to the future, I will say that we recognize that what we've put forward is a significant investment, an effort to right-size and modernize our service. Notwithstanding this commitment to public safety, I wanted the board to know that there are other areas and other cost drivers on the horizon that I would like the board to be aware of. First, body-worn cameras are being introduced by our comparators, inclusive of Peel, Halton, Hamilton, in an effort to demonstrate transparency and meet community needs and further build and solidify trust and confidence in the policing profession. This will be a substantial investment coming forward as part of the 2026 capital and operating budget. We have done a costing on what that would look like over a 5-year period. And it's not part of this submission, but in fairness, I wanted the board to know about that in coming budgets. Next, we do not have a facility master plan. We have initiated preliminary discussions with respect to the creation of a plan. I have spoken with senior staff at the region, and I've spoken with the the chief of EMS, Rick Farron, and we have spoken to some fire chiefs. And we are open to optimizing opportunities for co-location where it makes sense. Looking forward, you can anticipate continued investment in our front line and additional engagement with the community as we focus on being intelligence-led, addressing prolific offenders, high-risk offenders, and high-crime areas. We will continue to also critically examine other areas of the service, given the emerging pressures, expectations, and adequacy standards in our commitment to public safety. As the board knows, the Act is very much in its infancy, and there will be significant learnings over the next couple of years, which we know will have a direct impact on our service delivery and a direct impact on our resource needs. There will also be continued efforts to right-size our civilian staff as we move from what I call organic growth to strategically build the organization and properly support our operations with civilian personnel. Additionally, we continue to examine high-risk areas to ensure the coverage is adequate and effective, as I referenced, ensuring compliance with the Community Safety and Policing Act, thereby mitigating risk and exposure for the service and the board. As the board is aware, the region sets the timetable for budget deliberations. The service then creates an internal timetable. I thought it was important to highlight the length of time in the year dedicated to the budget process. This slide does not include the capital budget timetable that begins in March and ends in July. What I want to stress is the change in process that we undertook this year. It started with a memo that outlined program change process for the budget cycle, which was mindful of previous requests for clarification from regional council during previous processes. We were mindful that this new process should better align with the evaluation process undertaken by the region in terms of how they identify their program changes. And this new process demonstrates stewardship of public monies. It is in alignment with the board's strategic plan. This submission is intended to meet the community's needs and expectation, and it is intended to allow for continued modernization of our service delivery model. Previously, all program changes were presented by each superintendent and director for discussion and consideration for inclusion in the operating budget. Under this new model, we had persons that were actually working in the units come in and provide a very structured presentation detailing the pressures that they were working under. They were invited in to deliver a presentation to a panel that was comprised of all the superintendents, the directors, the deputy chiefs, and myself. What this allowed for was greater understanding of the demands of the unit, the requirements for the requested positions, how the position would benefit the service and the community, and the risks associated with not proceeding. Over the span of several weeks, we then heard from areas across the service regarding the pressures that they are facing and their proposed investments. In short, there was a significant effort at all levels of the service to prepare the budget that is brought forward to the board for consideration today. I would like to now highlight the pressures anticipated for 2025 and the assumptions built into our base budget to address these pressures. I thought I would separate the pressures into two factors, first being price and second being other cost increases that are as a result of volume increases. This slide provides the board with information related to price pressures. The region uses the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, to adjust year-over-year budgets to reflect inflation. Highlighted on this slide is the region's forecasted 2% inflation increase for 2025. As depicted, many of the major price pressures impacting a police service budget are not included in the goods and services used to determine CPI. And there's a list on the bottom of that slide that includes some of them. I plan to discuss each of these price pressures starting with the last bar of this graph, the bottom bar, which displays the police sector wages with an annual wage increase of 3.5% for the years 2023 to 2025, because it is the most impactful on our base budget. As you know, the collective agreement contains a provision to adjust the 2025 first-class constable wage to be ranked 6th amongst the Big 12. Of the services that have settled contracts over the years 2023 to 2025, the average increase for these years is approximately 3.5% per year. Considering our agreements include an annual 2% per annum for years 2021 to 2026, the 2025 wage provision is adjusting our internal wages to catch up for the years that we did not meet the average. Working our way forward on this graph, we need to highlight that our group benefit premiums are expected to increase by 12.8%. Just to qualify this, the increase in the monthly rates reflects not only the inflationary costs increase to the cost of products and services offered in our group benefit packages, but also reflects any enhanced benefits awarded during collective bargaining that are effective for 2025. For instance, the healthcare spending account, $200 per member. Next, statutory deductions are government-offered benefits. They include the Canada Pension Plan, employment insurance, and the employer health tax. They are estimated to increase by an average of 7.2%. This is mainly due to the Canada Pension Plan enhancement phased in over 2 years, 2024 and 2025. Next, software license fees and maintenance agreements have generally increased greater than the CPI. They are expected to increase by 5%. And finally, we have built in a 5.3% increase to our fuel rate over 2024 based on the region's recommendations. As we often mention, our wages and benefits represent 90% of our gross expenditure budget. And when we add the cost of our software licensing fees and vehicle maintenance and fuel, they represent approximately 95% of our total gross expenditure budget. This is all captured within our base budget alone. In addition to price, our base budget is impacted by other pressures, namely 4 program changes partially implemented in 2024 that require salary and benefit dollars to reflect the full year cost. New training regulations under the Community Safety and Policing Act have increased our budget costs related to off-site training courses offered by the Ontario Police College and the Canadian Police College, as well as training ammunition and arsenal supplies to support the additional requalification training days to comply with the Act. The 2025 budget was adjusted to reflect actual spending trends experienced in 2024, specifically increases to employee, medical, physical, and psychological evaluations for new members, and the safeguarding of members working in high-risk areas within the service. The service continues to see an increase in WSIB-related costs as a result of legislative changes. We also continue to support our capital financing strategy and the addition of $320,000 to the Capital Reserve Fund. When we consider the total impact of the price and other pressures on our base budget, it results in a 9.2% increase over 2024. To recap, the impact of police sector average wage settlements is expected to be 6.1%. The impact of additional salary and benefits to annualize the 2024 program changes is estimated to increase the base by 1.2%. The impact of statutory and group benefits in WSIB is estimated to increase the base by 1.4%. The impact of additional funding to support our capital budget will impact our base by 0.2%, and there are a number of other budget adjustments that result in a net increase of 0.3%, for an overall base increase, again, of 9.2%. This is a summary of all the program changes. The region's bylaws prescribe that program changes must be reported as a separate increase. For 2025, the investment will cost an additional 5.9%. In accordance with the budget planning bylaw, the program changes have been included at full annual cost. This slide summarizes all the elements discussed through this presentation to form the 2025 proposed operating budget increase of 15.1%. A further requirement of the region's operating budget process is to include high-level forecasts for 2 years. These forecasts are based on assumptions to wage increase, inflation at 2%, and continued investment to our frontline patrol, intelligence-led policing, and the right sizing of our service within the police sector. We also wanted to highlight that the budget is prepared using historical trends and forecasts, but includes a number of assumptions. The first being that 2 of our largest grants, which total 94% of grant revenues, are expiring on December 31st, 2024 and March 31st, 2025, respectively. The actual grant revenues for 2025 will not be known until these grants are renewed during the year, and therefore the assumption that funding will remain at historical levels has been reflected in the budget. The second is that OLG funding received from the City of Niagara Falls is not established until the end of each quarter. Historically, this budget has been set at $4.2 million. However, we have decided to reflect actual revenue dollars received over the past 3 years. This assumption has reduced our revenue budget by $300,000. It is also important to note that a number of budget items, like investigative overtime, we spoke of that earlier today, are highly dependent on the calls for service, type of calls, and complexity of the calls received each year. I showed you earlier that the volume of calls is increasing and the complexity of calls is also increasing. The estimates are prepared based on historical trends and current forecasts, but may vary as the year progresses. As you saw previously on slide 7, our calls are increasing. Recognizing budget pressures, the service explored a number of mitigation strategies to see where reductions could be made. All non-discretionary expenditures, including staff development, office supplies, consulting, administrative travel, and meals, were all held to the 2024 budget amount or reduced slightly where possible. Process improvements, providing for time efficiencies or repurposing of positions will continue to be reviewed through the year to ensure that we are operating in the most efficient and effective manner possible. Also mentioned in previous budgets is the use of reserve funds as a mitigation strategy. The service monitors reserves closely and has included a full report on reserves in Appendix 5 of the board report. A review of available reserve funds was conducted to determine if any funds were available to offset one-time pressures in 2025. Of our reserve balance, which is approximately 1.4 million, which is held in an unrestricted reserve fund. It's commonly referred to as the contingency reserve. Contingency reserves are available for use to fund one-time, non-recurring pressures or unexpected events and are not recommended as a temporary funding source, as it will only defer the pressure into the next budget cycle. Additionally, this reserve balance falls well below our target balance of 10 to 15% of operating expenses, which is set out in the region's reserve policy. We currently only have 0.6% of annual operating expenses in the contingency reserve. Upon review of these pressures impacting the 2025 budget, none were identified as one-time non-recurring pressures, and as a result, the use of the service contingency funds to reduce the 2025 operating budget has not been recommended. The final mitigation strategy reviewed was the staggered implementation of the program changes in line with expected recruitment timelines. The service faces lengthy hiring timelines for new constable recruitment due to the length of time required for interviews, background investigations, and most importantly, the availability of positions at the Ontario Police College. Based on the realistic recruitment timeline for the program changes included in the proposed budget, the service is expecting a surplus of approximately $3,650,000, or 1.9% in 2025, with all positions being filled by the end of the year. Implementing new positions partway through the year has been a mitigation strategy used in the past to offset current year budget pressures. At the request of region staff, and in line with the requirement of the region's budget planning bylaw, the staggered implementation of program changes was not proposed in the 2025 operating budget, and therefore all proposed program changes have been included with an effective date of January 1st, 2025. All of the necessary investments presented to you today are in context of the fact that policing in the 21st century has become very complex. Police services, like other public institutions, constantly face misinformation and disinformation, especially on social media and the internet. The very geographic location of the Niagara region and international border crossings identify the region as a highly sought-after hub for criminals to conduct drug trafficking and criminal activity. Our service has been involved with large-scale international organized crime drug investigations for the past 16 years, many of which, at minimum, are 1 year in duration. It is important to note that the service took the lead role in several of these transnational investigations, while also working collaboratively with our global counterparts in others. Additionally, social divides and international conflicts are often connected, and together they can lead to more tensions in our communities. Our members are increasingly called upon to ensure public safety during demonstrations and protests, and we assume carriage of criminal investigations that flow from these initiatives. In the national context, you've heard me say before that crime knows no boundaries. As I referenced earlier, last week, there was wide media coverage of our members' engagement in a transnational organized crime investigation whereby the persons organizing that, at the head of that organization, are part of a Mexican cartel, and they were responsible for the commission of a murder in Niagara Falls. There was a significant media event that took place in Los Angeles. It highlighted the pressures related to the globalization of the illegal drug trade, that where this cartel has brought significant illicit drugs into North America. In fact, according to Criminal Intelligence Service of Canada, the geographical reach of organized crime groups in Canada has expanded, with these groups now linked to activities in 72 countries around the globe. Also this year, our service collaborated with other services to dismantle a well-organized group that has been responsible for distributing dangerous narcotics in the region, in Hamilton, Haldimand, Norfolk County, and Niagara region. Cocaine, methamphetamine, fentanyl, and other drugs were allegedly being tracked by this organization throughout the Golden Horseshoe. Earlier this week, another media example event highlighted a collaborative investigation between Niagara, the Niagara Police Service, the Ontario Provincial Police, Barrie, Belleville, Durham, and York, known as Project Opal. I spoke about this in my opening comments this morning as a recent event, whereby our investigators were part of 8 bank robberies with over $2 million taken during these robberies. 5 suspects were arrested or have been charged. Finally, an investigation touched our region in December 2023 when 2 Ontario men, one of them living in Thorold, were alleged to have participated in the creation of terrorist recruiting videos in support of far-right extremism and the neo-Nazi terrorist movement, where they were arrested and charged. This 18-month investigation ended in the execution of several search warrants in the Niagara and Toronto regions, where investigators uncovered evidence supporting criminal charges against these 2 males. In other words, as you're driving home today, if you look out your passenger mirror, you'll see a sign on the mirror that says, "Objects in your mirror are closer than they appear." These crimes are happening in our back door. These crimes are closer than we think. They're transnational in nature, they're national in nature, and they're taking place in our community. As a service, our goal is to think globally and act locally. As referenced earlier, the new legislation requires our officers to complete over 85 hours of additional frontline training, with about 25 of these hours needed yearly to maintain certification, ultimately reducing the amount of time that these officers have on the road patrolling to keep our community safe. Having said that, these requirements also reflect a commitment to enhancing the skills and abilities of our first responders and also meet the requirements of the Act. Finally, we are seeing criminal activities become increasingly more sophisticated, as I just referenced, often crossing national and international borders, and criminals are leveraging advanced technologies in pursuit of their criminal enterprise. The question then becomes, how do we tackle this? How do we stop this? How do we prepare our police service for current and future challenges? And I believe the answer is that we engage with our community. We use data to make evidence-based decisions. We maintain transparency in our processes and in our interactions with the general public. And we focus on being intelligence-led to try to reduce crime and the risks of crime. By understanding this and achieving these objectives, by investing in our service and supporting our people out there doing the job, we share the responsibility of preserving public safety and maintaining trust and confidence in the Niagara Regional Police Service and policing in general terms. And that concludes my presentation at this time. I can stop talking and take questions if you like.
Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, we're going to open that up to questions, so I'll start with Member Yip, and then we'll move to Member Steele.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, aren't we all happy for that recess that we had? Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. In the time that I've been on Regional Council and in this board, I think this is probably the most comprehensive presentation that I've heard, particularly with respect to the requests for additional personnel, which is what gets a lot of my regional council colleagues riled up. And the need for them and the information about how long it's been since some of those units have seen increases in personnel, especially in relation to the increased calls related to the work that they do. I have a few questions. The first one is probably short, the other ones are not. So the first question is, how much of the total requested increase, the 15.1%, is directly related to changes to the Community Policing and Safety Act? There's mention of the training requirements in the presentation, but I know that's not all that there is. And I think it's important that we outline to Regional Council and the community what those costs are, because they're not necessarily costs that we would have suggested.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Member Yip. I don't have the number, I have not done the math to break them out by that way, but I think it is something we could probably secure for you within 15 minutes, looking to the Director and Manager of Finance. It's funny you asked that question, because I've thought that so many times during this process and never actually said, hey, can you give me the number? So that's a fair question.
Thank you. And I mean, I don't know that we necessarily need to have it right this minute, but definitely when the service presents to Regional Council, we want that number very clearly stated.
If it's okay, then rather than asking them to get it right away.
Yep.
Is it okay we take our time and have a
Absolutely.
fulsome?
Yeah, you've got until what, November the 14th?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. I'm confident they can do that.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Chair, I wanted to ask a couple of questions about slide 9, which was the emerging issues, domestic violence and disturbances, mental health related calls, armed and barricaded persons calls. Unfortunately, I'm of course not surprised, and I am very aware of the increase in domestic violence and disturbance calls. But I'm wondering two things about this slide. The first, while the numbers are of course still concerning, are you able to explain that, I'm not going to call it a trend because it's 1 year, but that downward turn in the number of mental health related calls? There's a drop of about 2,000 calls there between 2022 and 2023. Do we know why?
Thank you for your question. It's a good question. It's something that we've talked about. We would like to think that some of the partnerships that we have put in place are starting to reap benefits. We also know that we created our community-oriented response engagement unit, and through there and our MCERT team, by dealing with what we use the term prolific offenders, people that we have come to know during our provision of policing in an area, and also the creation of situation tables. We are doing our best to deal with those people that bring us the largest volume of calls. It's hard to say in such a short period of time if that's why. I think with the passage of time and the creation of we've hired Dr. Perez, a corporate analyst, we've got Ronnie in our Office of Strategic Planning and Innovation. We're integrating now with the region and populating all of their databases so that we're coming together. So I think a combination of that, I think we would have a better answer in 2 years, but it's a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you. And I was hoping to hear you say that, because if both of us are thinking it, then maybe it's true, and maybe we'll continue to see what will turn into a downward trend. Through you, Chair, the second question that I have in relation to that slide is, given the nature of the calls in those three categories and how those issues can overlap, is there a relationship on the slide between the three types of calls? Would calls potentially be classified in more than one manner and potentially counted more than once? I mean, like for instance, domestic violence and armed barricaded persons, that's going to happen, right? I don't know if they get counted under both categories.
I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
I know that Stats Canada, they identify the most serious offense. This data is from Stats Canada. And if I know Dr. Perez might be very well positioned to answer that question, so I would invite him or Ronnie to provide greater clarity with respect to that, if I may. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. So when we get a call, we get an initial call type and a final call type when the call closes. What gets reported is the final call type to Stats Canada. And no, these are very distinct calls. So if it gets reported as DVU call or a domestic violence disturbance call, then that's what it goes to Stats Canada, and it's different than an arms barricaded. So it could get classified, it could start as a DVU call, but it could end up as an armed barricaded call.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, I have a question, and maybe it's my last one. Hang on, let me scroll down here. This is not all the questions I'm scrolling through, don't worry. They're notes. So I wanted to ask about body-worn cameras. For the last several years, this has been discussed in terms of future plans for the NRPS. And it's a difficult issue because there are arguments made by members in the community who are in favor of body-worn cameras in terms of, they cite accountability and transparency. However, there are also arguments against body-worn cameras, particularly from people within various racially marginalized communities. For instance, Desmond Cole, an advocate in Toronto, says that body-worn cameras are a liberal panacea for people who are not really interested in decreasing the police's power. Some police will simply decide not to turn on their cameras at all, and body cameras fail to respond to the need for institutional reform. Another advocate says we should not be content with a flawed and expensive system, the body-worn cameras, to maybe document police violence after it has happened. Other advocates have said, well, all body-worn cameras will do is record what's happening to us, and there won't be an outcome, and so now these videos will go viral and we're victimized more. So my final question, unless you say something that leads to follow-up questions through you, Chair, you mentioned that the plan is potentially 2026, but what is the plan for instituting the use of body-worn cameras? Why haven't we done it so far? And the big question is, what would you say about the cost of the cameras and everything else that goes along with it, because it's not just, as we know, it's not just buying the cameras, right? So again, not looking for specific figures, but just if you can just speak to that, please.
Okay, thank you for your question. And I agree with you that body-worn cameras are subject of significant discussion. As part of our process, what our team has done is we have tried to forward think the costs associated with procurement, with storage, with redaction to ensure privacy interests are met, with respect to appropriate disclosure to comply with Regina versus Jordan, Supreme Court of Canada. In terms of the creation of policy, we have policy from other agencies, but given the fact that we have not yet purchased body-worn cameras or brought it to the board to seek your support, we have not created policy yet. But the policies I would suggest to you would be very prescriptive, that they're on at all times when an officer is engaged with a member of the public. And my view is that it would allow for complete transparency with respect to what has taken place. I can also say that based on my experience as a criminal investigator, the use of video was a tremendous tool for training to identify ways to enhance how we were doing police work. And the video also allowed, when the transcript was made, and investigators could listen to a transcript, to enhance the reliability of the evidence. And I know the Supreme Court of Canada has also viewed that as an enhancement investigative tool. And I know that in some instances, and there's no case law yet on body-worn cameras, but the Ontario Court of Appeal, there was evidence excluded and the name will probably come to me after I leave, where there is technology available to police agencies, the use of video equipment, and the police don't use it. So we have not landed in a place, Moore, McFarland, and Bogle, Ontario Court of Appeal, it came to me. No. Okay. No, I'm second guessing myself now. In terms of Mr. Cole's concerns, and I've read some of his correspondence, I would like to think that as an institution and as a province and a country, that we would be alive or sensitive to some of those emerging issues and try to come up with a process that enhances transparency, that enhances how we do our job, and enhances trust and confidence in the profession of policing.
Thank you. One part that you didn't speak about through you, Chair, is just some comment again on the cost. I think I've seen 3 million cited for just the cost of the cameras. We're looking at a lot more than that, though, if we.
So the forecast that we have, based on the cost provided to a neighboring police agency, I think our preliminary cost is $12 million over 5 years, inclusive of both capital funding and operational operating budget funding. I think in the neighborhood of 2.2, 2.3 a year, 2.4 operating budget, and $1 million capital in year one. Yeah, that's our best estimate right now. But again, we didn't plan on bringing it as part of this budget submission. We are simply trying to get as much information as we can so that the board doesn't say, boy, you came to me out of the blue, we had no idea you were looking at this.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I mean, part of the reason that I ask about that particular one, again, you know, when I'm sitting as a regional councillor rather than a police services board member, we have a lot of people in the community who say, you know, we need more police and we need more tools for police and we need more this and we need, you know, and then we do it and they're very upset that their property taxes have increased. So, so that's why I wanted to talk about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Great questions. Member Steele?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chief. A number of questions here. If you could go to slide 39. There you go. Thanks. With regards to the rationale, I mean, we're expanding our frontline expansion by 33 new officers. And they're all officers, or are some of those civilians?
They're all sworn.
Yeah, okay. So the rationale with regards to, a number of years ago, we added 40 new officers. We did it over like a 50% the first year by the time, and you did mention this, by the time we trained them and get them on, it was actually over, I think, about a 1.5-year period at that time to get all those members through police college and then into our training and then out on the road. So if you can explain further why the rationale is that you're putting 100% of it in the 2025 budget when the true cost in 2025 isn't going to be the $5.3 million.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Chair, through you, or for that question through you, Chair. You are correct. In, I think, the 29 budget for 2020, we asked for 40 police officers. And then with the onset of COVID, there was a challenge in our hiring and training, and that was delayed over a couple of years. You're correct. In terms of the request for this year, there's two pieces, and just to clarify, are you asking about the number 33 or the reason for the way the funding has been?
Funding, because you want 100% fund it, although you're only going to spend probably half of that in 2025.
Yeah, correct. That is correct, and the reason that it was, and I tried my best to explain it because I anticipated that question. The reason it was done that way is based on the, I'm just going to go to my notes. I want to get the name of the policy correct. It was based at the request of region staff, based on the region's budget planning bylaw, where their staggered implementation of program changes was not recommended. They recommended full in-year budget, which is why I went out of my way to talk to you about the proposed surplus, which would be $3,650,000. So as I stand here in front of you, and I will stand in front of the regional councilors in a couple of weeks, I will talk to that issue, that we're compliant with the region's bylaws, but we anticipate a surplus. If the will of the regional council is to modify that to reflect the actual spending, then that would be the will of council, and it would be up to this board to make that determination. I was trying to be fully transparent that this is what the bylaw says we should do. Here's what we anticipate the surplus to be. It's 1.9%. It's a lot of money. So that's the answer to your question.
Good, thanks. So further to that point, because I do have a couple other questions here. The budget surplus that'll be put in, if regional council, well, in fact, regional council can still send it back to us. We can just send it back and leave it alone. But if we didn't make changes in the 3.9 million.
$3,650,000.
3.6 million in surplus, what is the plan for that surplus? Because once operating is put into the budget, once these wages are put in, they're there forever until you start cutting staff. And rarely does police departments, fire departments cut staff. They don't. They tend to increase staff as population and urban areas expand across, specifically within our region. But do we have a specific use for that surplus, or is it just going to go into general surpluses and accounts that we carry now?
I will I'll make a general comment, and then I'll invite Director Rouleau up to provide additional clarity. We have had discussions with the senior staff at the region on how surpluses have been split in previous years. I have not been a part of a discussion about what would happen, pardon me, to the 3.65, whether that would go into our reserves or whether it would go into the pot of money at the region to deal with maybe another emerging pressure that might take place over the year. Or, you know, if, God forbid, we had some horrendous incidents take place where we were running a deficit and we needed to get monies from the region. So I'll invite Laura to provide additional context or top up that answer.
So through to the chair, so any surplus for levy departments and ABCs is first considered to offset deficits in other levy departments. And if, for example, the police does have a surplus, the overall consolidated levy, if it was in a deficit, then our surplus would be used to offset that deficit. And it's happened before when we were in a deficit levy department, surpluses offset our deficit. If the levy is in a surplus overall and on a consolidated basis, according to the region's surplus deficit policy, we could ask and request through to the treasurer of the region if we can keep that surplus. And it would be up to regional council on the direction or on the recommendation of the region's treasurer to allow us to keep the surplus. Last year was a good example where we had asked for the 1.9 and because the overall consolidated levy ended up in a surplus, we were able to keep it. So for this why we basically followed the direction of the region is that they did say that all other levy department program changes also follow the same format where they are implemented effective Jan 1. If there is a surplus, and that's on the assumption, that 3.6 is on the assumption that we would start effective July 1st on some of these programs, it would be at year end when we would determine whether we could keep it. And so there's no guarantees that we would have an opportunity to be the first. It would depend on how the consolidated levy is the actuals are realized for that year.
Thank you. And the reason why I bring that up is a number of years ago, we had $1 million surplus. I threw a motion on the floor at the region that we keep that. They voted it down. It was a very close vote. And then the next year, because we didn't have that million, then councilors are arguing with us about our increases. I don't agree with that plan that the region has. I've argued with staff for a number of years with regards to that. I believe that with the size, we are the largest dollar value within the region, bar none. We're the most costly department, and there's a reason for that. I believe we should keep our surpluses here so that we can help offset, especially on the capital side each year, to help keep our increase down. So that's something I will argue with the region this year. So I just want to make sure that that was out there. Specifically, this is a public meeting so that people know. The other issue, Chief, when you do present to the region, please put in, because a lot of this stuff we understand, but then there's 27 or 28 counselors that quite frankly don't understand this. The three of us understand this because we're here. But I think you need to spell out very in simple terms to council with regards to what the region staff have asked us to do on putting the 100% of the 33 people this year. I think you need to spell that out in a slide as opposed to just saying it. I think it needs to be on the board there. So I would recommend through this board that you do that. Because they need to understand that this isn't us, this is the region asking us to do it this way. Just so that when the three of us go there, we already know what you're talking about. For us to get up and start debating this, there's a lot of people that just don't understand. Some of them, that's the first night they see this, because they, quite frankly, don't read their stuff. And I've seen that for the last 6 years on regional council. And then they bring up arguments that night and they don't have any backing to it. So the more information we give regional council so they can make an informed decision on what we're doing here, the better off we are. So I'd ask that. On the 4 new senior command, looking at populations, Niagara right now is estimated at 532,000 in population. It's up from the latest consensus, which had us at around just a touch under 500. Most municipalities obviously have grown in Niagara quite a bit in the last year. But Halton being at about 600,000, Durham a touch under 700,000, Hamilton a touch under 600,000, and Waterloo region at about 675,000 people. With regards to what you're asking here on the senior command, of those 4 areas, are they very similar to what you're proposing here, or are they what we have today? Are they more? Can you give us an insight on that? If I didn't see it in there here, I apologize. In 277 pages of budget, I probably missed it.
Thank you. I have a very keen recollection of your colleagues at Regional Council asking for evidence and data, so we've tried to do that as best we can. And in order to answer your question, yes, Halton has added a 3rd deputy chief, Deputy Greco, Deputy Waslovich, and I went to the swearing-in a couple of months ago. Durham has 3, Waterloo has 3, London just added 3, Taichung just added a 3rd. Waterloo has added a new rank, a staff superintendent, which is a rank we don't have. So between the superintendent and the deputy chief, but it's a senior officer. Peel, I believe, has 5, but they're larger than we are.
Yeah,
so
I didn't include Peel, I didn't include York, only because they're anywhere from 1.2 million to 1.5 million. They're 2-3 times our size. So, I didn't include Toronto. Obviously, I looked at police forces that looked at our size of population. I mean, a lot of these too are a lot less land mass. They don't have water. I mean, there are nuances, and it's the same with our municipal budgets. Port Colborne owns a marina. Port Colborne is the only small community in Niagara that has a full-time fire department. So there are nuances within our own budgets. So obviously with the Niagara Regional Police Service, we have nuances that most other municipalities and regions across Ontario don't have. Windsor has borders, we have borders. Kitchener-Waterloo doesn't, Durham doesn't, Halton doesn't, Hamilton doesn't. So, I mean, there are nuances that put pressure on our budget that I'll never see. You know, Hamilton does have quite a bit of water in Lake Ontario, yet Kitchener-Waterloo has very little water. I mean, they don't have you know, 2 lakes and a large river, so. I understand all that, and I think, you know, between yourself and past Chief McCullough, they've explained that to regional councilor in a good way as far as what pressures are on us compared to other municipal services, so. But I just want to make sure that, you know, when we're going there and we're asking for 4 senior command new people, that, you know, we're basically on the same plane as other regions that are growing at pretty close to our pace, on the population basis.
Yeah, and in terms of the overall growth of the service, I'm glad you asked that question, because I've asked that question a lot during this process. And it's not that I'm asking for stuff that is out of line of what other services need, what other services have. It's not that I just say, oh, I want that. You know, we're in a situation right now because we've deferred things and we've delayed things, and we are now trying to catch up and right-size ourselves at a time when we're also recognizing the importance of, well, we're trying to deliver on recognizing the importance of community engagement and working with the community, and the creation of these positions. One, safeguards us in the tactical arena, but also positions us to really stratify our police response, to be, you know, focused on community-centric policing, to be truly intelligence-led, to be working with community stakeholders to identify and deliver on better public safety undertakings and initiatives. And we'll make sure that that data is really reinforced. The challenge we're going to have at Regional Council, I'm told I have 20 minutes, so it'll be try to be as suffice, or I just go up and take questions. I'm not sure which is easier, but.
We can give it to him, that's right. So we got 30 minutes we can add to yours. Thanks, Chief. And just one final question on overtime, and we already discussed this in an earlier report. You know, when we sat around this table, some of these people that are here today weren't here then. We looked at adding the 40 new officers would really help us in overtime. But if you look at our numbers, it hasn't helped us one iota. In fact, we've gotten worse. I know this board and staff and our PA are working very hard with regards to our membership and not taking as much overtime and keeping the well-being and everything of our employees. But we really got to tackle this overtime issue. It is literally killing us here as far as on dollars, which can be better utilized elsewhere. So we are really, I just want to make sure the public knows that we're really delving into this, trying to tackle this issue.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, and I agree. The stewardship of public monies is really important. And the other factor related to overtime is that means our members are getting tired and overworked. And, you know, by investing in our people, hopefully we create a healthier workforce who are better able to come to work, and we see a reduction in sick time and reduction in overtime, and we see a productivity increase and all those types of things that are related to having a properly staffed, funded organization that I can tell you the men and women of the service, they care, they want to do a great job, and this is an opportunity for us to support them in that.
Yeah, because, you know, the things that this board's done in the last number of years, I mean, the 6 years that I've been here and a little bit before that, is the fact that I think we've given the tools to the service to help with this, bringing on our psychologists and bringing on new boots on the ground and things like that. But it's still tough for us to sit around this table and look at the numbers today on that earlier report where it really hasn't affected. In fact, as I said earlier, the overtime's getting worse. So, I mean, we really want to see the fruits of the labor and that make sure that everybody's healthy within our organization. So, I mean, we all got to work hard on that. So, I had another comment and I totally lost it. It'll come back to me, but yeah. So thanks for those answers, and I look forward to the presentation to the full regional council. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Kyokyo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members still basically talked all three items I was going to talk about. So I guess I just will go back on a couple of them. The senior command team, 4 new positions. I think I've asked you this. By the way, what we covered at the workshop was very valuable, and you did bring a lot of it back here today, which I thank you for that. When we look at the 4 senior command team, when we look at an organizational chart, a lot of times, we look within the organization and try not to hire or try to cut costs sometimes, or look at other members throughout the organization where they can cover those positions. Have we looked at that to see if that we can do it within our organization rather than hiring, another deputy chief and another couple inspectors and so forth?
Okay, thank you for your question, and through you, Chair. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide greater clarity with respect to the senior leadership team. I've thought a lot about this, and in our discussions, we've thought a lot about it. And in some instances, we're actually uncoupling responsibilities, like the risks associated with having investigative services and tactical services together. In other organizations, you don't see that. I think it probably was done organically and by virtue of the facilities that the service had. I think in retrospect, leaders that have been here or before me or in other organizations would think that that's not an appropriate way to structure a police service. And we're trying to make it right by providing proper oversight and command of important job functions. In terms of so that's at the inspector and superintendent. And in terms of the deputy chief level, the senior, the deputies and myself, in a perfect world, we're able to focus on strategic initiatives and not be drawn into tactical or transactional decision-making. And I'm trying to position us to be able to do that so that we can focus on community engagement, mobilization, and coming up with strategies on how to provide a better service. And then in terms of the span of control, sometimes the organizational risk based on an FTE, for the number of employees, full-time equivalent employee, can be misleading. The risks in one department can be very high, even though the number of employees in that department may not be quite as high. So the span of control is not necessarily, we're going to have 340 people under each person. It's the functions and the risks that they have and responsibilities. The move to really community-centric policing, this org structure that we've brought to you today is completely in line with stratified policing, completely in line with academic research, completely in line with the Community Safety and Policing Act. And in fact, when I read the new bylaws that came this morning, I think, what am I, 9.4? I think 9.1 maybe, specifically says that that's the board's responsibility. So by doing this, we are in fact aligning ourselves with the board's responsibilities under the Act. So I thank you for your question.
All right, thank you for that. When I look at the proposed organizational chart, maybe just clarify for me, I'm looking at the Deputy Chief Operations Services, the new superintendent. The other block there is empty. Is that an upcoming position, new position, or am I misreading this?
The slides were done, we tried to, in the workshop, we talked about showing the movement. So we tried to construct the slides to be transitional. So if it shows an empty chart, it probably is one of the transition slides.
Oh, okay, all right, I get it.
So as an example, the slide that's on the screen there now, 31.
I'm looking at, page 31.
I don't see an empty one there.
Well, I'm just looking at my chart here.
Are you blind? No, there's empty boxes there.
There's empty boxes there, that's why I asked. I just wondering, are those new positions?
Oh, I'm told I'm
okay.
told it's the same slide, it just didn't transition yet.
All right, okay. One other item I just want to talk about is the new 33 officers that are being recommended here. I know back in 2020, we hired 40, as you stated, and last year I think it was 20, another 20. So that's 60 and we're proposing another 33. So we're looking at, almost 93 new officers since 2020. And, we still have some concerns with, like members still stated with that absenteeism or sick time. And I'm just saying, when we went through it the first time with 40, I know I was on regional council, and a lot of pushback from the public and some councilors because of, 40. So they're thinking, there's high expectation, thinking that now in their community, we're gonna have more officers, we're gonna have more of this, more of that, because they're seeing 40 as a big number that's going to help some of the concerns that they have in their communities. Whether that's happened or not, I'm not sure. You probably can give us more feedback on that. But now with another 33, those same questions are gonna come up. So, because you've been going to different municipalities, local municipalities, and they're bringing concerns to you. But now, seeing 33 more people come on, there's gonna be a high expectation of our service to provide more. Can you give us some feedback on that?
I can, thank you, and through you, Chair. In 2019, you're correct, we came as part of the 2020 budget submission, asked for 40. Based on the data at that time, we were 40 people short. COVID came, the implementation of those 40 was difficult, the hiring and the training. We spoke about that a minute ago. And then last year, we asked for 20. Those 20 the data told us that during the preceding couple of years, an increase as a result of legislation in the members' time they were taking for maternity and paternity leave and WSIB-related issues was excess of 20 members. So in essence, we weren't really increasing our establishment. We had lost the equivalent of those 20 members in that time. So now we've done 2 workload studies to measure workload, one with the shift relief factor, one with the agency relief factor. We took the conservative one asking for 33, and that takes the shift relief factor into consideration. Our hope is that with those 33, we will be strategic with how they'll be deployed, because we need to be respectful of the collective agreement. But we don't want to simply assign them based on the platoon. We want it to be tied to stratified policing initiatives like community policing. So our community-oriented response engagement unit, our hope is that by meeting our contractual obligations, being able to increase our response times on one hand, but by 2, on the other hand, having these members engage in problem locations, prolific offenders, high crime areas, we start to turn the needle, have less calls for service, deal with those problems, which would then in turn free up more time for our first responders to be more visible and be out and be in the communities. I can tell you that in every meeting I've had with elected officials, every single one of them says they want to see more of us on the ground. Every single one of them says they'd like to see us do more. Not a single one has said, I'd like to see you do less of this, and I'd like to see less police officers. That's on the one hand, and then I know, as you reference, on the other hand, at budget time, they're going to say, we don't want to pay any money for that. So that is, but as in my role as the chief, the position you've appointed me to, and under the Act and my ethics, I'm responsible for public safety and accountable for public safety. So I'm trying to provide the framework for us to position ourselves to police the community in an adequate and effective manner. I am sensitive to the competing pressures, though, and I appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you for that. My other question was, I think Member Yip covered that one. I know training, unit expansion, that's part of the Police Act, right? That we really have no control over. And there's other items here that, and yeah, I think that's important for us to see, because I think also to let the people know, I think we only have control over these program changes other than in this budget, other than like the base budget is the base, it is what it is. It's 90% that, or 95, whatever the number is, that we have no control over. It's this that we have some control over, and with this even 5.9%, you know, it's even less than that because of the act. If you want to comment on that.
I think your comments are fair. The majority of our budget is base budget. A large part of that is, as we discussed, the collective agreement, compliance with the collective agreement. A big part of that is also right-sizing, annualizing, I'm sorry, for the things that were deferred last year because they weren't all year. And then costs that we have no control over, like Canada Pension Plan, things like that, that also have an impact. And then when it comes to our program changes, actually, I had this discussion with the region staff. I don't think the term program changes is accurate, because in many instances, it's simply doing what we're already doing. Our pressures have increased. As Member Steele said, our calls for service are increasing. The complexity of calls that we're responding to is increasing. Like, we've stopped going to false alarms. We're trying to reduce workload, but the calls that we're going to are becoming more complex. You know, if it was an emergency room, the nature of the injuries or the medical treatment is more acute. It's requiring, you know, a first responder. It's requiring tactical deployment. It's requiring specialized investigations. They're not as simple as they were 15 years ago.
I thank you for that. I know even traveling these conferences this past year, which I thought was very important, is the networking that we did with other police services and telling me their concerns that they have in their regions. It's, you know, it's no different anywhere else than what we're going through now. So one thing, when I'm talking to some different board members from different regions, the increase in their budgets this year, it really varies, and I don't think we're too far off from what other regions their increases are. So is that something that you can also show? I didn't see it on here, but is that something else you can also show to council, just to show comparison of where we are, or if you can?
I will share as much as is
The only
permissible.
reason I say that, because there's some municipalities that have gone up, like, I think 19%.
I will say that in my discussions with chiefs across the province, the request that I've brought forward is in keeping with many of them and less than some. That you are correct, there are pressures across the province on police agencies. You know, the likes of some agencies are increasing their entire establishment by 10%. So you are correct. Our request is not really inconsistent, and at a time when, you know, policing in Niagara is in some respects more challenging than policing in other places, because we have the borders, we have the lakes, we have, you know, our opioid deaths. You know, I think we're number 2 in the province. So we have challenges that are unique here that require a significant investment and commitment by our men and women.
Yeah, I just thank you for that. I just want to let members know and the public that, you know, we're not too far off from everyone else. When you see a large number like this, it's like, wow. But if you look at, like you stated, what, you know, our calls that are coming in, it's not only Niagara, it's also throughout Canada. Actually, even the conference we just came back from, they've had their struggles in the United States and all over the world. So this is the times we're in right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Yip and then Member Gibson. Great, Member Gibson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just more of a comment than anything, and I look at this, and I've been advocating for more police officers when I was on the region from day one. To me, it's really fundamental. The average number of police officers per 100,000 people in Canada varies, but it's around 160 to 170 per 100,000 people. That's kind of the standard. When you do that math out at projected 550,000 people next year, we should have over 900 police officers sworn. And we're sitting at what? 700 something? How many sworn do we have, Chief?
I can clarify the average, and cop pop is a number that we've included in our data because the region have asked that. And it's police officer per person population for clarity for the thing. Ours is 152. The average in Ontario is 171, and the average in Canada is, according to my Stats Canada, is 178.
Okay. A little different numbers here that I dug out. But fundamentally, we are way short officers compared to the national average, which every other community has achieved to reach their goals of providing adequate and effective policing. If you look at just that, we are quite a bit behind. And I was, even at the region, I was speaking about this when I was there, that we need to hire 30, 40 officers a year for the next 5 years for sure, and not even needing to, allocate them, oh, we need an extra unit, guy here or extra woman here, whatever. We just need to keep up, and we're not keeping up. We're falling behind, which may contribute to part of the reason why we hired 40, but our stats are still not good because we're so far behind. I think we're probably 200-300 people behind right now, according to the national average. So in its most raw form, not even having to allocate and say why we need to achieve, these extra people, we just have to keep up. And everybody else in the country seems to know that they're keeping up and they're probably doing a better job of achieving numbers in crime being solved. And I advocated for this, and to me it's so simple. And when somebody say, well, what do you need those 33 officers for? What do you specifically need them for? Well, just the growth of Niagara, our 4 borders, our water, all those contributing factors, we should probably be higher than the national average because we have so much more issues to deal with. So again, I look at that and I would say to the region, I would say that is a simple statement that we're that far behind. And I think that's an important concept for people to understand. So we're going to have to just keep hiring people. Somebody thinks they hire 40 people and we're done. Oh, we're good for another 5 or 10 years. No, we're not. The growth is indicating, we need to hire 30, 40 every year for the next 5 years and then stop and have another look, and we may have to do it again just to keep up because we're way behind right now. So just my comment. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for your comment. In my comments, I tried to reference the fact that we would continue to be looking at our organization critically on a go-forward basis. There are areas of the organization that I remain concerned about in terms of the workload on some of our investigators. But in fairness, in terms of our ability to hire, train, get to the Ontario Police College, mindful of the pressures, the significant financial pressures, I came in here today with what I think we need to be adequate and effective. There certainly are areas that we need to be continuing to look at, to critically examine for the benefit of our investigators, but for the people that we serve, the victims of some of these crimes. So I appreciate your comments, Member Gibson, and we will continue to look at our organization through a critical lens. also trying to be mindful of the stewardship of public monies. And we know what we're the most expensive business line at the region. And we're trying to do our best job possible in the most kind of fiscally responsible manner that we can. And but that's why I was cautious not to say we're not going to be back next year asking for more, because I believe it is highly likely, as we continue to really look inward, that we will find areas of concern. And that's why I appreciated the comments that were asked of me here today. So I thank you for your question and your support.
Okay, thank you. Member Yip, and then Member McKendrick or Vice Chair, do you have any comments? Okay, and then I'll wrap up. Thank you. Oh, and then Member Steele. So Member Yip and then Member Steele.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, I changed my mind and I do have a comment. And it's brief, but really when this gets presented to Budget Review Committee of the Whole on November the 14th, last year Council was prepared to vote down this budget, to vote down the services budget and take their chances with arbitration. They were absolutely prepared to do that, which is why, as the only person who hadn't spoken that night, I sent the budget back, hoping that if we did a little bit, then we could go back and the budget would pass. I don't yet, and I don't know if Member Keokio or Member Steele do, I don't yet have a temperature for what Council is thinking about the police budget this year. But I think what's going to be important, and you know the questions you're going to get if you've paid attention to regional council for really even one budget cycle, it's the same questions very often. But in particular with the 33 frontline officers, it's going to be important to answer what happens if we don't, right? What is the toll on the teams here if we don't? What if we only hire some of them, right? And I think that's going to be, really key in terms of what it does to overtime dollars, what it does to member wellness, that's going to be important to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Steele?
Thanks, Chair. Helps when you do write these things down. Through the chief to Ms. Rollo, development charges that the region collects. Growth is supposed to pay for growth. So with regards to development charges, and when the region does their development charges by law, it's usually every 5 years, it could be sooner. Municipality of Port Colborne's going through theirs now. How does the region treat the police department with regards to development charges, and how are we included in the mix of growth pays for growth?
So through to the chair. So yes, that exercise is done every 5 years and they recalculate their DC charge. We do participate in that process, and it's typically equipment, vehicles, and the uniform equipment to equip new staff, new officers. It's one time in nature, and so we've been using those funds through our capital budget when we've asked for 15 new vehicles over 3 years. So typically, the DC Reserve Fund doesn't necessarily fund ongoing costs. So from a growth of adding additional staff members, frontline officers, we would tap into that for the purposes of paying for any equipment that we need to support that growth. But on an ongoing, recurring, the DC fund is not used for that.
Is it not used for that because the region is not using it for that, or is it not part of the equation when they're looking at it?
It's a good question, and as a matter of fact, I posed the question to the region staff a couple months ago in terms of using DC staffs for DC reserve funds for the operating budget. And it was, at that time, the Associate Director of Budgeting had said that they were considering it as well, or looking into it, but historically they haven't used the DC or the development charges for ongoing operating. But I might be mistaken because I don't know the full consolidated, but they don't typically use it for growth to support it on a long-term basis. And to answer your question, we've never been allocated any for operating, but we have been allocated for capital one time.
Yeah, that was a question they actually answered last year when I asked it. I mean, policing is, although we're dealing in human beings with regards to our officers, but it is growth. I mean, the only reason we're growing is because, as with employees here, is because the region is growing. And if you look at the numbers of the four regions that I quoted earlier that are similar populations, there's a chart on here, I won't go back to it, but that shows that most of them are actually ahead of us in on-the-ground boots. So we are catching up, which is a good thing. We're not far behind. One is quite a bit ahead of us, but one, I think it was Waterloo region we're pretty close with. But I think that's something we need to ask finance at the region is can we include the bodies that we're hiring? Because most of these, now, going back, I'll just step back. When we hired the 40, those 40 brought us up to numbers that we hadn't seen in over 20 some odd years at the NRP. We were actually less in boots on the ground than we were way long time ago when I was a lot younger. We've caught up to that. Now we're starting to grow at the proper level as the region has grown. But I think that's a question we need to ask because that's an important component. I mean, Public Works may need to go out and buy a couple extra plows because of the new streets and roads that they're doing that they acquire from expansion of urban boundaries. But I think the people part of our business is true growth, should be paying for growth. The reason why we're hiring new officers is because we've gone from 400 and some odd, about 460,000, and by the middle of next year or the year after, we're up to 550, if not more than that. So, come people, come more houses, come more businesses, comes more crime. Hate to say it that way, but it's true. And, we need those people to look after that. So I think we need to, before we do our presentation, I will ask our consultant that we're dealing with in the city of Port Colborne that question is, can we use the human factor as far as growth pays for growth? I don't remember anybody saying there wasn't a rule against it, but I don't think that was asked. So, but if we could clarify that, I think it's something that the three of us need to bring up at the region because we are a little bit of a different animal within the departments of the region.
If I can just add on the DC, I think one of the reasons why they haven't historically used it for operating is because it's a pot that doesn't have a recurring revenue source. However, I do agree with you, and what I will do is ask the Associate Director of Budgeting that question, because it could be a mitigation strategy for the levy, as the consolidated levy. The other thing I wanted to mention was assessment growth. There is 1.5% in the levy for assessment growth, and assessment growth is never allocated to police. And other services, my associates throughout the province, will, as we share our budgeting pressures and our increases, a lot will say they get so much from assessment growth. Now, the region uses assessment growth for tax incentive grants, but in their budget planning policy, it does state that assessment growth should be used for pressures in growth. And I think they have a strategy not to use it, but I think that's another, I mentioned it to the region at a recent conversation that we had with them, that next year when we do the budget planning and they present the preliminary numbers to the Budget Review Committee of the whole, that we would like to have a different input in that, and that we need them to understand the program changes that we're anticipating, because they never include that in their initial numbers, as well as whether we should be allocated a portion of that assessment growth. So.
Great. Thanks, Chief. Thank Ms. Rolla.
Thank you. So thank you so much for a very thoughtful, evidence-based budget. It was great to see. Again, I geek out when I hear these things about the budgets. I'm echoing some of the comments that have already been made, so I'll try and keep it short. But the right sizing of the years that we did not have enough officers is important. And also recognizing, I know we've talked a lot about the legislative changes to leaves, WSIB, those types of things, as we work towards a more representative service, so that, we're not excluding people because we're just trying to make sure that we have all of the officers here all of the time, which that doesn't necessarily happen. Slide 39, I did want to make the comment that I agree that we should see the full year and then maybe what the in-year cost is on the same slide to make it a little bit easier for people to understand and digest, as well as recognizing, if any, maybe START or something, what are the additional CSPA costs? So maybe the training officers, for example, the expansion of the training unit. It's difficult to quantify community engagement. It's kind of like prevention for fire, where how do you indicate how many smoke alarms have saved lives? So how many police cars are driving by that now prevent an accident or domestic violent case? And to Member Yip's point about risk, I think it's important to talk about those risks of not hiring the people, not hiring the 33 officers, because it's that, it's the prevention that people aren't going to necessarily see a return on investment right away, and that's how some people are thinking about it. In addition to the fact of the wellness and overtime, I'm concerned about our members who are working 9 straight weeks of nights, things like that. So, and I know it's not just one unit. I know that there's other units that are involved, and you've picked the most urgent from that. So I think that's important. I like the comments at the end here where we've been talking about the development charges versus the assessment growth, because that's important as well. Property tax is supposed to look at things like operating costs, whereas development charges are more the capital. But because we are a service-based organization and 91% of our costs are service-based, it means that the region should be looking at a different funding model, and when there is a growth within the region, so they should be looking at that. So I'm going to urge and echo the comments that have been made by our other members for the region to consider that in the future. As well as to kind of finally wrap up with it is, we are talking about the police budget right now. However, what is never talked about is the fact that a lot of these costs are born from the fact that upstream from the judicial system is not recognized, and then downstream, so any wraparound services that could prevent or reduce the cost. So we briefly talked about it when we said, why is domestic violence calls going down? And we're hoping that it's because we're either responding faster or we have other services that are wrapping around. And again, these are hard to quantify, but I think the public has to understand that we're not asking for the budget to be increased just for the sake of increasing the budget, or we want more officers. It's from a need from the downstream, a need from the upstream, and at the end of the day, when you don't know who to call, you're always calling the police officer, and you're calling 911, and it often ends up being the service that ends up going out. I'm going to guess that, for example, when I hear about bylaw, I believe that bylaw officers tend to usually work until maybe 6 p.m. or maybe in the summer they work until 10 p.m. But what happens if, I'm a mom who has a young baby who ends up having a very loud neighbor making a lot of noise and everything else? You're not waiting until the next morning to make your call to the bylaw officer who's going to come out and say, well, I wasn't here, I didn't hear it, I can go and say something to them, but then it happens again the next day. You're calling 911. You're calling the police officer who hopefully is coming out and helping with that, which is a bylaw case, and then therefore it's actually not a policing cost that we're recognizing. We're actually recognizing municipal costs that should be with the municipal. And I'm not saying just bylaw. I'm sure that there's lots of other incidences like that where we, as the service, are providing the wraparound service that could be potentially coming from somewhere else. So I think just being mindful of that is important, that it's not that we're purposely asking for lots of expensive police officers. We're asking for the service that needs to be there until other organizations are capable or willing to or able to provide those additional services. So I'm happy with the budget the way it is. I'm there to support our regional council members on the 14th. I'll be zooming in for that to be there and hear the budget and hopefully support and answer any other questions. So thank you for that. There wasn't really a question. But do any other board members have any? Because it's a very big, obviously, budget and lots of discussion around it. Seeing none, I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to just reread the motion since we had a bit of a break before. So if I can have members Yip and member Steele move that the Niagara Police Service Board receive and approve the proposed 2025 operating budget for the Niagara Regional Police Service and Board, resulting in a total net expenditure budget before indirect allocations of $216,958,546, and further that the consolidated budget of the service and the board be submitted to the Regional Council for approval. All those in favor? No one's opposed, so that is carried. Thank you. There's not too much more. We'll keep going. So for items 9.5 to 9.12, they are special fund requests, and I would like to remind members of the public that the special fund does not form part of the police operating budget and is separate from the regional tax base. The special fund is a discretionary pool of funds which is used for grants and charitable donations. Disbursements from the fund are made in accordance with guidelines provided in the Community Safety and Policing Act and with Board Bylaw 403-2024, Special Fund Administration, Limitations, and Guidelines. I'd like to move them in, move block 9.5 to 9.12 as per the recommendations noted in the agenda. If I can have members Steele and seconded by member Gibson. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of those numbers? Seeing none, all those in favor? No one's opposed, so that is carried. Do any board members have any other new business? Seeing none, Chief?
No, thank you.
Perfect, so we'll move to 11.1 and 11.2. I'll move those in block. If I can have members Kiokio, members Gibson move that in accordance with the board direction, the board decisions and/or in-camera reports are being made available to the public. All those in favor? No one's opposed, that's carried. And if I can have members Yip and Vice Chair Kappas-Vanu move that the board move to close session for consideration of confidential matters pursuant to Section 44 of the Community Safety and Policing Act, namely for subject matter related to potential litigation, human resources matters, information supplied in confidence by the Ministry of the Solicitor General, and from vendors for contract awards, as well as legal matters that are subject to solicitor-client privilege. Any questions or no? All those in favor? No one's opposed, so that is carried. And with that, thank you very much, and we will move into closed session. And we'll take a break for at least 5 minutes.